Beyond the Mage. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 26 Fang of the Hidden Mist. The bustling stall instantly quieted down. The young stall owner seemed somewhat disheartened, hanging his head dejectedly for a long time before finally raising his head again, only to suddenly realize that there was still someone standing in front of his stall. A young man, not very old, dressed simply. The young stall owner had a good memory. After a slight pause, he recognized Gouda as one of the onlookers from earlier. "There's no more excitement to watch, aren't you leaving?" the young stall owner said with a sneer, but he didn't give Gouda a hard time. Gouda smiled at the young stall owner and said, "I didn't come here to watch the excitement." Gouda pointed to the bronze object that had just caused the argument and said sincerely, 4 Sean gold coins, for sale." Gouda was truly sincere, because his entire fortune amounted to only 4 gold coins and 15 silver coins. The young stall owner hesitated for a moment, not replying immediately, but staring at Gouda's still somewhat childish face, and asked, "You don't think I'm lying to you? Although the runes are worn, you can still see that the complete runes must be quite remarkable," Gouda confirmed after examining the bronze object several more times. The young stall owner was silent for a moment, then finally picked up the bronze object and handed it to Gouda. "Deal." Gouda didn't hesitate, decisively taking out 3 Sean gold coins and 23 leaf silver coins from his pocket and handing them to the young stall owner. Looking at the neatly arranged gold and silver coins in his hand, the young stall owner hesitated for a moment, sighed, and then said, "To tell you the truth, this bronze artifact is called the Fang of Hidden Mist. When it was intact, it was a first-ring magical alchemical creation, capable of casting the first-ring spell Hidden Mist. However, the spell runes were accidentally worn down during a battle, so what I said earlier, that if it were repaired, reselling it for 60 or 70 Sean gold coins wouldn't be a problem, was no exaggeration. The average price of a first-ring extraordinary item is generally 65 gold coins." Gouda didn't appear too excited, because if the stall owner had said that, there must be more to come. And indeed, there was. "However, my father once consulted an enchanter repairman. After examining it, the repairman discovered that the worn area of the Hidden Mist Fang's spell rune was precisely the core rune. Repairing it would almost be equivalent to re-engraving the spell rune, which is beyond his capabilities, so the matter was left unresolved. Therefore, repairing it is not a simple matter. I see you're not exactly flush with cash. If you change your mind, let's forget about this deal." The young stall owner looked somewhat helpless and annoyed. "It's alright. If I really can't find a way to repair it, I can keep it as a collectible." Gouda's calm voice rang out. The young stall owner was startled, not yet reacting. Meanwhile, Gouda, having obtained the item he desired and being short of money, had no desire to continue browsing and had already strolled away. Herb garden. Before a dark brown door. Gouda, who had just returned from the town square, lightly knocked on the door. "Cough, come in," the familiar voice of the mage Seda, punctuated by a cough, came from inside. Gouda quickly pushed open the door. The mage Seda sat at a long wooden table, facing him. Upon seeing Seda, Gouda was startled. In just over 10 days, Seda appeared to have suffered a severe illness, his face extremely pale and sickly. While Seda had previously looked ashen, he hadn't been this pale, almost devoid of color, as deathly as a corpse. Suppressing his doubts and restless impulses, Gouda quickly stepped forward, bowed deeply to Seda, and respectfully presented him with a receipt from Phil's potion shop. His head bowed low. "My lord mage, today I delivered the potions I have stockpiled in the herb garden to the city. This is the receipt." "Put it on the table." Cough. Seda's voice sounded weak and feeble. But Gouda dared not show the slightest disrespect. He carefully placed the receipt on the long wooden table and stood respectfully to the side, awaiting Seda's instructions. Master Seda, expressionless, half opened his eyes, scrutinizing Gouda as if deep in thought. After a few moments, he suddenly opened his eyes wide, a glint of light flashing into his cloudy gaze. "Lately, I've noticed you've been frequently leaving the herb garden." Gouda was startled, then his expression changed drastically. revealing the panic of someone caught in the act. He clenched his fists, his face a mixture of fear and shame. Master, I was distracted, indulging in the city's pleasures, neglecting my daily cultivation. Master Seda stared at the repentant Gauda, considering something. Master, I will definitely return to the right path from now on. Please forgive my ignorance and indulgence, Gauda added, offering several more flattering words. But Master Seda paid no heed, letting out a sinister laugh as he watched Gauda's performance with a mocking gaze. I don't care whether you're diligent in your cultivation or not, I only care whether you're interfering with my work. Master, I swear I haven't neglected my work at all, please see the truth. A sense of unease welled up in Gauda's heart. The next instant, Master Seda reached out and grabbed Gauda. Gauda knew something was wrong and instinctively wanted to resist and dodge, but he quickly calmed down, hesitated for a moment, and ultimately didn't act. It wasn't time to turn against him yet. Master Seda's hand gripped Gauda's wrist like an iron clamp, its magical power surging, bringing Gauda excruciating pain. Do you know that I've been researching the formula for the spirit potion for a full 10 years? You hear me clearly, not 10 days, not 10 months, but 10 years, Master Seda said coldly, his voice filled with murderous intent. Now that I'm so close to success, I can't tolerate any accidents, you wicked brat, always running to the city, and you don't have any real skills. You'll get into trouble sooner or later, let me tell you, if it were anyone else, death would be the end of an apprentice. I know none of you truly consider me your mentor, but that's alright, I don't care. Because I haven't considered you apprentices either, but you're different. Even if you die, you'll only die from my potion. The Mage Seda's expression grew increasingly ferocious, almost roaring at God. Do you understand? As the Mage Seda's expression hardened, the pain in God's wrist intensified. He answered with difficulty, his voice trembling, I understand, having learned through the torture spell that God wasn't lying. The Mage Seda stopped his spell. God, however, was already drenched in sweat from the intense pain, his clothes soaked through. He bit his lip, unable to remain calm any longer. A soul from modern society, faced with something that clearly intended to kill him yet also threatened him relentlessly, was unable to accept it. But he understood that neither pleading nor anger could change the other's mind, he could only force himself to continue enduring. From today until the drug trial, you are not allowed to leave the herb garden. The potion doesn't need to be sent to the pharmacy for now. The Mage, Seda, was satisfied with the immense pressure he had placed on Gauda. I understand, Master. Faced with Seda's overwhelming power, Gauda gritted his teeth and submitted. Hearing Gauda's submission, the Mage, Seda, let out a long sigh of relief. At this critical moment, his tension and pressure were no less than Gauda's, who was plotting a rebellion. Step back, the Mage, Seda, waved his hand. Gauda bowed again before leaving. He knew very well that the Mage, Seda, didn't care about his politeness or respect at all. However, Gauda maintained a respectful demeanor, determined not to let Master Seda detect even the slightest hint of his intention to rebel. He knew he couldn't afford to let Master Seda become wary. The two were already vastly different in strength. The most crucial factor for a successful rebellion was catching Master Seda off guard. Chapter 27 Earth-Vein creatures appear. Having been startled by the Mage Seda, Gauda first washed himself before returning to his workshop. Luckily, that old man only made his move today, Gauda thought to himself, feeling surprisingly fortunate. At least he had used up his savings and learned a new spell. He was also fortunate to have been quick enough to prepare many things in the previous 10 days. The Mage Seda's confinement of him had completely thwarted Gauda's escape plans. Since that was the case, only one path remained. Damn it, Gauda roared. He refused to believe that he, a high-achieving student from another world, would lose to a native old man on his deathbed. While encouraging himself, Gauda took out the Fang of Hidden Mist he had bought that day for 4 Shan gold coins. Gauda's limited magical knowledge didn't include the Hidden Mist spell, so he naturally didn't know its specific effects. But the Hidden Mist was a first-level spell. This was enough to fill Gauda with boundless anticipation. The name doesn't sound like an offensive spell, but maybe not, Gauda guessed. Regardless, as long as he repaired the Fang of Hidden Mist, he would know what the Hidden Mist spell really was. Gauda gripped the Fang of Hidden Mist, concentrating intently, and cast Repair Plus. His mana began to overflow, a faint glow flowing from his fingertips. The severely worn runes on the surface of the Fang of Hidden Mist began to flicker with a faint light, extending and healing, as if an invisible brush was drawing on it. This process lasted for about 5 minutes, and a fine layer of sweat appeared on Gada's forehead again. With a sigh, the glow from Gada's fingertips dissipated. However, the fang of hidden mist in his hand was not yet fully repaired. Only a small portion of the worn runes on its surface had healed, the majority remained incomplete, awaiting further mana infusion. It wasn't that Gada didn't want to continue, his mana was completely depleted. With my current mana, repairing a first-level transcendent item is indeed not something that can be done in a day or two, Gada had expected. Repairing the divine ring had already taken him a great deal of effort, so the hidden mist fang, being a first-level transcendent item, would undoubtedly be even more difficult to repair. More than that, he was worried that the repair spell plus wouldn't work. After all, it was just a trick, while the hidden mist fang was a first-level transcendent item. It was a leap in rank. The repair spell, enhanced by the wind spirit moon shadow, is powerful, but it must have its limits. It's impossible for a single trick to repair a high-level magical alchemical artifact. But thankfully, at least a first-level magical alchemical artifact isn't the limit of the repair spell, Gada thought to himself with relief. It will take about 10 days, he estimated the progress and came to a conclusion. There's no use rushing, but 10 days is still enough. He stopped thinking about it, carefully put away the hidden mist fang, sat cross-legged, and began his daily cultivation. After finishing his daily cultivation, Gada returned to his bedroom and had just lain down to rest. Before he could fall asleep, he heard an unusual sound. Squeak. Squeak. It sounded like the squeaking of mice, but much sharper. The strange sound seemed particularly jarring against the otherwise quiet environment of the herb garden. Gada immediately stood up, alert. Along with the odd sound, a faint, rotten, fishy odor wafted through the air. What's that? Gada's heart tightened. The next moment, a piercing scream of agony echoed from the apprentice's room not far away. This was followed by another scream filled with horror and fear. The shrill sound instantly jolted everyone in the herb garden awake, including the sleeping Amy. He scrambled to his feet, immediately lighting the oil lamp in his room, then instinctively looked at Gada. What's going on? Something seems to have happened. Gada's voice turned serious, and he swiftly cast Mage's hand. A ghostly hand appeared, silently extinguishing the oil lamp Amy had just lit. Having done this, Gada got up and went to the door, carefully opening it a crack. Through the crack, he looked in the dim candlelight of the corridor towards the direction the sound came from. It was the room of the other two apprentices. The door remained tightly shut, making it impossible to know what had happened inside to cause such agonizing cries. Just then, the continuous howling from within abruptly ceased. The herb garden fell silent for a moment. But only for a moment. Boom! With a deafening roar, the closed door shattered into fragments and splinters. Immediately afterward, a ferocious shadow emerged from the broken doorway. By the dim candlelight of the corridor, Gada could make out a rough outline. It resembled both a wolf and a rat. It resembled a rat in appearance, with distinct head features. A pair of brown eyes gleamed with a fierce light, and its ears were enormous. Sharp, curved fangs protruded from its wide mouth, and its fur was a dark, swampy green, shimmering with a cold, resilient sheen. Beneath the fur, clearly defined muscles revealed immense strength and agility. It resembled a wolf because its size far exceeded that of a normal rat, reaching 2 meters in length and nearly a meter in shoulder height, making it more like a wild wolf. A leline creature, Gada thought in horror. This wasn't the first time he'd seen a leline creature. But the ones he'd seen before were things like the gray-eyed rat and the dark swamp worm, the shame of leline creatures, possessing leline blood but no real fighting ability. This kind of incredibly imposing leline creature was truly a first for him. The giant rat's brown eyes darted around, then suddenly focused, taking on a new target. The door to the room next to them was now open, and 2 apprentices were peering out. Gada and Amy weren't the only ones awakened by the howling. All the apprentices around were startled awake. However, not everyone was as cautious as Gada. Squeak! The giant rat pounced without hesitation on the 2 apprentices peeking out. Gada witnessed this scene and was even more horrified. The giant rat moved so fast, and the 2 apprentices seemed to have wet themselves in fear, standing there frozen in place as the giant rat pounced. It was easy to imagine that this attack would be severe enough to leave them half dead, if not dead. Beast! Just as Gada was beginning to mourn for the 2 apprentices, a hoarse but fierce voice came from the end of the corridor. The air suddenly filled with intense energy fluctuations. An arrow made of pure flame streaked through the air, seemingly igniting the very fabric, and shot straight at the giant rat that had pounced on the apprentices. Sensing the danger, the giant rat immediately made the wise choice, abandoning its nearby prey and opting to dodge. However, failing to notice the flaming arrow in time, it could not escape the fiery punishment. The flaming arrow struck its waist accurately, and the raging flames instantly spread, engulfing the giant rat's body. Squeak! The giant rat let out a painful squeak, but its tough fur prevented the flames from spreading further, temporarily stabilizing its injury. The constant intense heat emanating from its body intensified its pain, fueling the giant rat's ferocity. It let out another shriek and lunged ferociously towards the direction from which the flaming arrow had come. There, a figure of modest stature appeared. The Mage Seda. In the herb garden, only the Mage Seda could cast such a powerful spell. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Repair completed. Awakened by the apprentice's cries, the Mage Seda arrived at the scene promptly and acted decisively. Although he never cared much about his apprentice's life, at least to him, the apprentice was part of his property. Property is meant to be used, not destroyed like this. Therefore, he had to stop the giant rat's rampage. Facing the giant rat's attack, which would terrify most people, the Mage Seda remained unusually calm. After all, for a seasoned mage apprentice like him, who had been a third-class apprentice for many years, ordinary level 0 Leeline creatures were nothing special. And this giant rat was indeed not special, much less a formidable enemy. Under Gauda's watchful gaze, the Mage Seda raised his right hand. After a moment's delay, a dazzling light bloomed in his hand, as bright as a small sun, momentarily blinding Gauda. If he felt dizzy at this distance from the Mage Seda, the giant rat that pounced on him was even more so. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say it was blinded. In that instant, the giant rat could see nothing but a dazzling white light, let alone attack the Mage Seda. With the intelligence of a level 0 Leeline creature, it was naturally unable to react in time to this sudden flash of light. After its vision went completely black, it paused for a moment, seemingly bewildered. That brief pause was enough for the Mage Seda to activate his spellcaster and cast his next spell. Ignoring the tears streaming down his face from the dazzling light, Gauda strained to see the light. He vaguely saw another beam of blazing red light shoot out from it, striking the giant rat directly and fiercely in the head. Then, the dazzling light dissipated. The ferocious giant rat lay sprawled on the ground, not quite dead, but barely clinging to life, completely devoid of its previous ferocity, unable to move. Its body was covered in charred marks, a bloody mess, occasionally twitching, completely transformed into a gutter rat. Seeing this, Gauda breathed a sigh of relief, but his heart leaped into his throat. The power of the Mage Seda seemed even more terrifying than he had anticipated. Whether it was the power of his spells, his understanding of spellcasting, or the speed at which he cast spells, it was all enough to fill Gauda with awe. Gauda even secretly thanked the giant rat, now half dead. It was its appearance that gave him the opportunity to further understand the Mage Seda's strength before he completely broke ties with him. Stop looking, clean this place up, and then get on with your business. The Mage Seda glanced expressionlessly at the apprentices who finally had the courage to leave the room, coldly instructing them before turning and leaving. The apprentices who had escaped the ordeal looked at each other, still not quite understanding. Gauda, however, had already rushed forward, opening the door and walking straight to the dying giant rat. Without hesitation, he stomped on its head, ending its last breath. A rat's head delivered right to his doorstep, why not take it? The wind spirit and moon shadow flashed by at just the right moment. Origin: 0 ring, human, 1/7, gray-eyed rat, used, dark swamp worm, used, wolf rat, 1/7. The incident of the Leeline creatures attacking the herb garden passed by uneventfully. The deaths of the two apprentices caused no ripples whatsoever. If Gauda hadn't personally buried the bodies of the two victims with the other apprentices, he might have even thought that the Leeline creatures had never appeared. Occasionally, the apprentices would whisper about the matter while eating. Don't Leeline creatures live in the wild, far away from us? How could they appear in the herb garden? Some apprentices were puzzled, still shaken, and even couldn't sleep because of it. What if another Leline creature pops out of nowhere while I'm sleeping tonight? In the minds of most commoners in this world, Leline creatures were terrifying beings that only lived in the wilderness outside the city. The city, on the other hand, was a relatively quiet and peaceful world. Of course, this was just a misconception formed by the limited understanding of the commoners due to the propaganda of the rulers. That's just what the higher-ups say. The city is so big, and the number of city guards is limited. How could they possibly completely isolate Leline creatures? Another apprentice whispered. Gouda, who was eating nearby, nodded slightly upon hearing this. Thinking about it, it made sense. Even in his previous life, there were plenty of cases of wild beasts wandering into developed cities. Not to mention that the cities in this world were less developed, with many unknown areas. Furthermore, there were many different kinds of Leline creatures, each with extraordinary abilities, far surpassing wild beasts in power and supernatural power. How could they possibly isolate Leline creatures from the city, something even in his previous life couldn't do? There were definitely Leline creatures lurking within the city, and they would occasionally surface. However, even if a Leline creature did appear and cause death, it would be quickly dealt with, and the matter would be suppressed. The impact of panic and unrest among the crowd was far greater than the death of one or two people. This was no different from his previous life. The apprentices understood this principle, and Master Seda certainly understood it even more clearly. Therefore, the appearance of the giant rat and the night raid didn't cause him any ripples in his heart. He simply thought it was bad luck that he had stumbled upon it. In the workshop, Gouda sat upright, focused and attentive. Deep within his consciousness, a 5-petaled lotus flower emitted a faint glow. However, today, beside the 5th petal, another lotus petal was slowly materializing. After more than half a month of cultivation, Gouda's meditation technique had progressed rapidly, and he was finally about to break through, materializing the 6th petal. The time was right. Now, he just needed to make the breakthrough in one go. Without any hesitation, feeling that he was just one step away, Gouda began to break through. He concentrated all his attention, his consciousness gathering on the lotus platform, using his spirit to outline the 6th lotus petal. After an unknown amount of time, with a hum, the previously illusory 6th petal finally took on its physical form, materialized by Gouda. In an instant, streams of warm heat surged from the depths of his consciousness, flowing throughout Gouda's body, nourishing his mind and restoring his strength. The 6th petal was formed. His meditation technique had taken another small step forward. Opening his eyes, Gouda couldn't help but smile. Before turning against Master Seda, any improvement in his strength, even a slight breakthrough, would be welcome. Perhaps it would be the difference between victory and defeat. His nearly 2 weeks of dedicated training would not have been in vain. It also proved his intuition was correct. Although his talent for guiding magic remained unchanged, his soul talent far surpassed his predecessors, causing his progress in meditation to be as if it had been fast-forwarded, much faster than his predecessors. In fact, much faster. In this light, in terms of mage talent, perhaps he could be considered a semi-genius. The Fang of Hidden Mist should be repaired tonight. After a brief moment of excitement, Gouda quickly calmed down and returned to reality. He still had a major crisis to overcome and couldn't waste a single moment. Today marked exactly 10 days since his confinement, and the repair of the Fang of Hidden Mist was progressing as he expected. However, his meditation technique was also due for a breakthrough at this time, and Gouda, eager to succeed, temporarily set aside the repair of the Fang of Hidden Mist and focused on his breakthrough first. Having successfully broken through, Gouda didn't delay any longer and took out the Fang of Hidden Mist. After 9 days of repair, the runes on it, which had been blurred by wear and tear, were now mostly restored, with only a small section in the very center still damaged. The pattern in the upper right corner, which the young stall owner had identified as the mark of the O'Kenley Merchant Guild, was completely repaired. Of course, Gouda knew nothing about the O'Kenley Merchant Guild and had no interest in it. Drawing upon his mana, he cast Repair Plus through a spell model. A radiant glow of transformed mana appeared in Gouda's hand, swirling around and gradually permeating the Fang of Hidden Mist, like a stream of life, meticulously stitching together the damaged runes. The last remaining fragment of the rune began to slowly and methodically repair itself. About 5 minutes later, a bead of sweat appeared on Gouda's forehead. Mana was a part of a mage's power, and sweating from excessive consumption of one's own power in a short time was a natural bodily reaction. His mana was nearing its limit. The repair of the Fang of Hidden Mist was also imminent. Gada gritted his teeth and persevered. As the last ray of light flowed into the Hidden Mist Fang, the repair was finally complete. Chapter 29, Concealment Technique. The magical runes on the Fang of Hidden Mist had been restored to their original state, regaining their luster and magical aura. Its magical power seemed unaffected by the previous damage, rather, it appeared more stable and powerful after being baptized by the Repair Plus spell. God focused his mental energy on the repaired Fang of Hidden Mist with great anticipation. Immediately, relevant information flowed back. The first level spell, Hidden Mist, can be cast once daily without cost. When casting Hidden Mist, the Fang of Hidden Mist will be enchanted, dealing increased damage when attacking. Hidden Mist, Conjuration, first level, a cloud of mist, 20 feet high and 20 feet in radius, lasting for 1 minute, rises from you. The mist is still, obscuring all vision, including dark vision. No creature can see anything beyond 5 feet, approximately 1.6 meters, and vision within 5 feet is greatly reduced. Gentle breezes can disperse the mist within 20 seconds. Strong winds can disperse it within 5 seconds. The mist can be burned away by fire. This spell is ineffective in water. It's a spell without any offensive power. Disappointed? A little, but not much? After all, just hearing the name, Gada could roughly guess that it wouldn't be very lethal. At least it wasn't the worst-case scenario. It was at least a spell useful in combat, not a purely supportive spell like healing. Moreover, there was an unexpected surprise. Besides having a first-level spell, the Fang of Hidden Mist also had an additional effect, enchanting. This was equivalent to a supernatural item having 2 spells built into it. Its reputation was well-deserved. The Okenly Merchant Guild, which could be called the most powerful magical alchemy and artifact guild on the entire continent, was indeed extraordinary. Gada really wanted to test the power of the Fang of Hidden Mist after it was enchanted. However, considering that the mage Seda was in the herb garden, if he made any noise and attracted Seda's attention, there was a risk of prematurely exposing himself, so he decided against it. How to utilize this first-level spell? Gada fell into thought. The alchemist who created the Fang of Hidden Mist had an obvious idea: create an environment favorable for melee combat using the Hidden Mist spell, and then attack using the greatly enhanced Hidden Mist Fang after its enchantment. A very good synergy. The problem is, to use the Hidden Mist Fang to attack, one must actively get close to the Mage Seda. And the Mage Seda has at least 2 spells that require contact to take effect. This contradicts God's planned combat method. God, who was deep in thought, suddenly noticed a note on the Hidden Mist spell, and a wonderful idea flashed through his mind. Perhaps, it can be used like this. When God returned to the bedroom, it was late at night again. Amy was already fast asleep as usual. But this time, God didn't tiptoe around as usual, but came to Amy's bedside and gently patted his shoulder. Amy woke up groggily. "It's me, God, is there something you need?" Amy's voice was still hazy, not fully awake. As they spoke, God had already lit the oil lamp in the room with the mage's hand. In his real hand lay 5 3-leaf clover coins, gleaming faintly. "Go to town tomorrow and buy me some things. The rest of the money is your reward," God instructed. What do you need this for?" Stimulated by the coins, Amy finally snapped out of her daze. Sitting up abruptly and asking, puzzled. "Never mind, whether you help or not is just a matter of a word." Amy lowered her head and pondered for a moment, then looked up at Gada earnestly and said, "All right, I don't need a reward. I'll help you for free." Gada nodded, equally earnestly saying, "Thank you." Time passed quietly, day after day, until the last day of the awakening month arrived. This was the day Phil's potion shop was to restock. Just at noon, the mage Seda personally left the herb garden. Gada, who had been watching Seda's movements closely, knew perfectly well that Seda was going to Phil's potions shop to retrieve the final ingredient needed for concocting potions. As soon as he saw him leave the herb garden, Gada rushed into his workshop. Of course, it wasn't to concoct a basic spider venom potion. At this juncture, he had neither the mood nor the need to do such pointless work. God was making final preparations before his confrontation with the mage Seda. He took out the glass bottles he usually used to dispense potions, then cast Acid Splash Plus to obtain acid that could be preserved for up to a day before filling the bottles. Afterward, he placed these homemade acid bottles into various pockets of his clothes. He checked them, confirming that they wouldn't make any unusual noises when moved and weren't visually noticeable, before letting out a sigh of relief. He had done his best and left the rest to fate. God had made as many preparations as possible within his limited capabilities. Whether it would succeed or not depended on luck. The mage Seda returned to the herb garden 2 hours later. He deliberately chose this moment when God was leaving his workshop, bumping into him in the corridor. "Master Mage," God said, stepping aside respectfully to let Seda pass. Seraph Seda glanced at God expressionlessly, offering no reply, and coldly brushed past him. Only after watching Seraph Seda's figure disappear from sight did God resume his steps. Although Seraph Seda tried his best to appear emotionless, God could clearly sense a burning desire in his eyes, indicating he was currently excited. Excited, the more excited the better, God thought to himself. While Seraph Seda returned to his room to begin his secluded potion making, Gauda wasn't idle either. He mentally planned the details of the final showdown, rehearsing it in his mind. He carefully considered every possible scenario after the confrontation with Seraph Seda, pre-planning responses to any potential dangers. Then, he waited for news from Seraph Seda, perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow. That night, Gauda didn't receive a summons from Seraph Seda, but he barely slept a wink. Spring Sprout Month, Day 1. Morning. Before the long wooden table, the mage Seda, his face visibly weary, stood motionless, seemingly lost in thought. After a long while, he raised his hand, his gaze fixed on the potion he had just concocted. He gently swirled the bottle, his eyes following the swaying liquid, his heart churning with anxiety. This should work, right? Although the mage Seda was confident this time, the approaching moment still made him anxious. "We'll see," he said, gritting his teeth, suppressing his restless emotions, finally deciding to stop worrying. "Summon God to test the potion," he ordered. Chapter 30 Abundant Martial Virtue. God pushed open the dark brown door once more. "You've come," said the mage Seda, sitting at the table as usual, looking at God without any emotion. "You've come," God nodded, glancing at Seda, who seemed visibly older than he had been 10 days ago. While God was observing Seda, Seda was also observing him, seemingly quite pleased with his obedience. He pushed the potion bottle on the table forward. "Drink it, you have some talent in potion making. If everything goes well, I will truly take you as my apprentice." Perhaps because he was so close to success, and to ensure a good omen, Seda had actually set aside his previous threats and proactively promised God benefits. Looking at the fluorescent blue liquid in the conical potion bottle, God found himself unexpectedly calm. He smiled and said to Master Seda in a very sincere tone, "Thank you, Master." Perhaps he had prepared for this day for too long, and been nervous for too long. So when the moment actually arrived, he was calm and didn't experience much emotional fluctuation. Moreover, at this moment, Gauda even felt a sense of indifference towards life and death. He didn't belong here, this life was a gift. If he were the one to walk out of here after today, it would be a huge gain. If not, he would at least have lived for an extra month, so it wouldn't be a loss either way. Since he couldn't lose anything either way, why should he be afraid of him? Having completely figured this out, Gauda threw all his tension and worries aside. With a thud, the medicine bottle on the table floated up and landed directly in his hand. The hand of a mage. Master Seda was somewhat surprised by Gauda's actions, but at this moment, his attention was entirely focused on whether the potion would be successful, so he temporarily ignored Gauda's seemingly overstepping behavior. Gauda opened the bottle, and then, under the watchful gaze of the mage Seda, raised the bottle to his lips, as if to drink. God, who had been watching Seda out of the corner of his eye, noticed Seda staring intently at the bottle in his hand with a look of fascination, and a mocking glint appeared in his eyes. The next moment, God struck. He didn't drink the potion as Seda expected. Instead, with a resolute heart, he swung his right hand, gripping the bottle, violently. The potion, which Seda had concocted with immense expense, effort, and high hopes, arced through the air and crashed to the ground in front of Seda. With a crisp, heavy thud, shards of glass scattered everywhere. The fluorescent blue liquid detached from the broken container, splashing onto the cold, hard ground, forming irregular, mottled marks, silently marking the irreversible decision. The air was filled with the smell of the potion. Everything seemed to freeze at that moment, then shattered swiftly. "What are you doing? I'll kill you, I'll kill you," a brutal roar echoed throughout the room. The usually aloof Seda, like a lion about to explode, stared at the puddle on the floor, unable to contain his emotions any longer. God watched coldly. Seta's reaction was exactly what he wanted. To destroy someone, you must first drive them mad. God knew perfectly well how much Seta valued the potion in his hand. Therefore, he wanted to further enrage Seta, to make him lose his mind, thus increasing his chances of victory by a tiny margin. Poof! While Seta was still roaring, suddenly, a handful of flour was thrown at him. The old mage had never seen such an unsportsmanlike fighting style. Caught off guard, he was blinded by the flour. And God's next attack was already upon him. He took a few steps back, creating more distance between himself and the mage Seta, while simultaneously drawing a potion bottle from his waist. Just as Seta was blinded by the flour, he hurled it at him. It was the homemade, throwable acid bottle that God had prepared beforehand. Sprinkling ash plus pouring sulfuric acid, a classic double whammy. God's childhood martial arts films hadn't been for nothing. Meanwhile, although the mage Seta had been caught off guard by God's underhanded attack, he was no pushover. The instant he was hit, the mage reacted swiftly. Without any visible movement, a distinct magical fluctuation rippled through the enclosed room. The acid bottle God had thrown, less than a foot from Seta, suddenly stopped, as if it had struck a transparent but sturdy glass dome. The glass bottle shattered instantly, the liquid inside splattering out with a pungent sulfurous odor. Acid splashed everywhere, a large portion of it aimed at the sorcerer Seta. Given the corrosive power of the acid, if it had landed on Seta, it would have certainly given him a severe beating, if not a decisive one. But like the bottle of acid, the splashing acid was completely blocked, dripping onto the floor and unable to reach Seta's body. Is this all you're relying on? At this moment, Seta finally managed to open his eyes, his anger turning into a mocking laugh. Using some underhanded tricks, plus a bottle of acid you somehow got your hands on, you think you can turn the tables. The moment he smelled the pungent sulfur, Seta understood the liquid's true nature. You dare show off such tricks in front of me? His face was now extremely grim. You'll regret this. Today I'll make you kneel here and beg me to kill you. Faced with Seta's blatant threat, faced with a reality that Seta had easily and effortlessly blocked his first attack. Today, only one of us will leave this room alive. God's voice was icy cold and calm. He hadn't lost his courage because of Seta's methods. Instead, for the first time, he openly displayed his fangs before Seta. Seta, however, didn't take God seriously at all, assuming he had lost his mind. Although I don't know where you got this bottle of acid, do you really think you can be my opponent with these external objects and some thuggish methods? A mage is a mage because a mage is omnipotent. Only a mage can kill a mage. You are a mage apprentice, and so am I. God looked coldly at Seta. Seta seemed somewhat surprised by God's audacity, and also amused, saying contemptuously, "It seems I haven't taught you enough, which is why you have such a ridiculous idea. You should know that there are differences even among mage apprentices." God ignored Seta's verbal attack. Activating a spell model takes time. This is because mana needs to flow through the spell model to transform into various incredible magical effects. This is called casting time. The more powerful the spell, the larger the spell model, and the longer it takes to complete the flow. He spoke with the mage Seta for two reasons. First, to vent the frustration that had been building up in his chest for a month, and second, to buy himself some time to cast his spell. At that moment, God flicked his right hand. A subtle energy fluctuation gathered in his hand, solidifying into a ball of acid shimmering with a greenish light. The acid ball flew from his hand with his gesture, leaving a slightly distorted trail of light that traversed the short distance between him and the mage Seta, shooting towards his face. Acid Splash Plus. Chapter 31 Spell Clash. Now that the battle was over, there was no need for God to hold back any longer. This was a life or death struggle. Whatever the means, he had to use them without reservation. The eerie green acid ball flew at incredible speed, and its destructive power was not to be underestimated. But just as the acid ball was about to touch the mage Seta, an invisible barrier blocked it, causing the acid ball to explode prematurely. The intense acidic substance instantly scattered, forming a small area of acid rain. But even so, not a single drop of acid could get close to the mage Seta. A magical alchemical item, it should be a first level one. Seeing this scene, God's expression turned grim as he made his judgment. To be able to block his two attacks so easily, and for the mage Seta to not even make a casting motion, meant that it was most likely not a trick mastered by the mage himself, but rather a supernatural item he was equipped with. Given the Mage Sada's status as a potion master and a senior mage apprentice, it was only natural that he possessed one or two first-level magical alchemical items. God had also considered this point during his rehearsal. However, the world of magic was too magnificent. With his shallow knowledge of magic, he couldn't possibly determine what kind of spell it was, what its effects were, or what its flaws were. Acid Splash, compared to God's complete ignorance, the Mage Sada was far more knowledgeable, recognizing the spell God had cast at a glance. His ashen face turned slightly blue. He took a deep breath and clicked his tongue in amazement, saying, "I truly underestimated you, my good apprentice. I haven't even mastered this spell, yet you've learned it. I really don't know where you got the spell formula from, or when you mastered it, but, well, that's all." As his words fell, the Mage Sada finally made his move. An eye for an eye. His anger towards this apprentice who dared to defy his authority had reached its peak. The Mage Sada extended his withered right hand. His index finger pointed at Gouda. A tangible vortex appeared in his hand, transforming into dazzling red-orange light, radiating intense heat. An arrow of fire had taken shape. Following the direction of the Mage Sada's index finger, the flaming arrow streaked through the air like a meteor, trailing a fiery tail as it hurtled towards God. The flames roared, and the speed was incredible. The distance between them was so short, and God hadn't mastered any spells to increase his agility. It was obvious that even a physically robust creature like a wolf rat couldn't dodge this attack. He would have nowhere to hide. And indeed, that was the case. However, God remained unusually calm. Facing the oncoming, blazing arrow, he didn't change his expression, nor did he make any attempt to dodge. That would only waste precious time. The Mage Sada's knowledge of the fire arrow spell was already known to God. He couldn't afford not to prepare a countermeasure. The next instant, a faint light enveloped his body, spreading out like ripples. The light appeared just before the flaming arrow struck him. Increase resistance. The magically constructed barrier revealed its effectiveness. The fire arrow, which could have inflicted fatal damage on God, was instantly weakened upon impact with the barrier. What struck God was merely a relatively mild burst of flame. While it burned God's clothes and scalded his chest, that was all. It caused no further harm. Good lad, the Mage Sada was quite surprised by the sight, his initial contempt vanishing. You've been hiding quite a bit of skill. He was astonished by God, the new spell he had cast, and God's abilities. The more powerful a mage, the shorter the casting time. Logically, Sada's attack spell should have been cast before God's. However, the fire arrow and the two magical auras that boosted resistance appeared almost simultaneously. This was because, although God didn't know the specific spells Sada possessed, he was certain that after he cast Acid Splash Plus, Sada would retaliate. Therefore, after casting Acid Splash Plus, God immediately activated the Increase Resistance spell model. So, even though his casting time was slightly longer than that of the Mage Sada, because he didn't react after Sada cast the spell, but rather activated the spell model before Sada cast it, plus the time it took for the fire arrow to travel, the two ended up casting their spells simultaneously. In God's previous life's fighting games, there was a professional term for this, prediction. This was a scenario that only occurred in battles between old mages, yet it happened to a first-class apprentice he hadn't even considered a threat. How could Sada not be surprised? God's current situation wasn't good. His face was flushed an unnatural red. Even though Increase Resistance blocked most of the fire arrow's power, the remaining energy still severely damaged him. More importantly, his mana was already mostly depleted. Besides the difference in the number of spells they knew and the difference in casting time, the biggest difference between God and the Mage Sada lay in the number of spells they could cast. The two appeared to be mage apprentices, their levels seemingly similar, but Goddard was only a first-class apprentice, while the Mage Sada was a third-class apprentice. Goddard's current mana could only support him to cast 5 spells before being completely depleted. The third-class apprentice, Sada, on the other hand, had enough mana to cast over 20 spells. A mage without mana is worse than a super minion. This is a universally acknowledged truth. And with the Mage's Hand spell he cast earlier, God now only had enough mana for 2 more spells. Goddard took a deep breath, remaining calm, gritting his teeth and forcing himself to temporarily ignore the burning pain in his chest. Whoosh! Another acid ball appeared in his hand, and with a flick of his arm, he launched it at the Mage Sada. He didn't dodge Sada's fire arrow spell. Knowing he couldn't avoid it, he simply placed all his hopes on the Increase resistance, spell. This was also to buy time, ensuring he would retain the initiative in the next round. Gata was betting that the Mage Seda would be overly confident in his fire arrow spell, believing it would be enough to defeat him, and wouldn't immediately prepare another spell. He won. So, in this round, the initiative remained with Gata. Gata's third spell was still Acid Splash Plus. This is really weird. The Mage Seda saw all of this and couldn't help but curse inwardly. Despite a significantly faster casting time, in the 3 rounds of spell exchanges, only the second round ended in a draw. The other 2 rounds saw Gata gain the initiative. Who could he complain to? Chapter 32 The Chain Scheme. Unable to discern whether it was jealousy or admiration, Mage Seda's emotions were complex, yet he remained confident of victory. Your methods have indeed exceeded my expectations, but judging solely from your magical power, how many spells can you still cast? Mage Seda spoke with unwavering confidence. This robe I wear has a built-in first-level magical shield. Even if I stand still and let you attack, you won't be able to harm a single hair on my head even if you exhaust all your mana. Shield. Gata silently memorized the spell. Mage Seda was indeed not deceiving Gata. The acid ball, as before, exploded in front of Mage Seda, the splashing acid being blocked by the magical barrier. Mage Seda was unharmed. Admit defeat, tell me where you learned your magic, and perhaps I'll give you a quick death, Mage Seda said, shaking his head. Having come this far, even if there was no hope ahead, there was no reason to turn back. Gata ignored him, sweat beading on his forehead. This was due to both the burning pain from the burn on his chest and the excessive strain from the depletion of his mana. Acid Splash Plus was more powerful than Acid Splash, but it also consumed more mana. If it weren't for his month of intensive training and the slight increase in his mana, he wouldn't have been able to cast even 5 spells. Another acid ball condensed in Gata's palm. The final spell was still Acid Splash Plus. Although God didn't speak, his actions spoke volumes. The Mage Seda's expression darkened further. Seeing God's repeated provocations, he finally couldn't suppress his anger. You ungrateful wretch! The third acid ball was again blocked by the Mage Seda's shield spell. However, after blocking multiple spells, even though the shield spell was a first-level spell, its power was almost depleted. The Mage Seda wasn't prepared to put himself in any danger and decisively attacked, aiming to defeat God before the shield spell's power was completely exhausted. He took a sudden step forward, raising his right hand simultaneously. A blinding light, enough to dazzle an ordinary person, burst forth. It was the same method that the Mage Seda had used against the wolf rat. Gata didn't have time to close his eyes. This was beyond the reaction time. The light was incredibly intense, instantly filing Gata's vision. He felt a burning sensation in his eyes, followed by intense pain, and tears welled up uncontrollably. His vision vanished in that instant. Gata finally understood what it felt like to be blinded. He didn't bother wiping away his tears, nor did he try to open his eyes to look outside, nor did he make any blind attempt to dodge. Instead, he decisively reached into his robes. He pulled out a bronze object resembling a fang. The Fang of Hidden Mist. Gata gently waved the Fang of Hidden Mist. A thick cloud of mist instantly surged from it and rapidly spread outwards. At the same time, a powerful energy swirled around the Fang of Hidden Mist, causing it to tremble as if it were alive. Energy flowed into the Fang of Hidden Mist like lava. It resonated softly, its surface glowing, signifying its imbued supernatural power, capable of inflicting even greater damage on its enemies. Demonic transformation. The process was as fluid as mercury spilling onto the ground. Meanwhile, mist spread rapidly, silently filling the room and shrouding it in a hazy fog. Previously clear vision became blurred in an instant. Only things within arm's reach could be discerned. Anything beyond 5 feet was obscured by the dense fog. Throughout, God maintained a distance of more than 5 feet from the mage, even expending his limited mana to cast Mage's Hand to retrieve the medicine. You make me invisible, I'll make you invisible too. Now they were evenly matched, back to square one. But the flash of light lasted only a moment, while the hidden mist spell lasted a minute. The advantage was mine. The rest of the time was God's domain. Setter opened his eyes wide and looked in the direction God had been looking, only to see a dark, indistinct patch. He couldn't even make out the outlines of anyone, let alone a person. He was both shocked and furious. A first circle spell, concealment of mist. Where did this kid get a first circle extraordinary item? Even I only have 2 first circle magical alchemical artifacts. Now, his previous contempt had vanished completely. This kid has a big secret. After God had shown him so many things, Setter was well aware of this. Whoosh! A sharp sound accompanied by a gust of cold wind came from directly in front of him. Although his vision was obstructed, the sound was unaffected. Setter reacted immediately and quickly dodged to the side. Bang! Thud! 2 sounds rang out in succession. A glass bottle and a bag of unknown contents exploded beside Setter. Also, with his vision obstructed, God naturally couldn't accurately aim at Setter, so it was understandable that he was dodged. Acid again. The pungent smell of sulfur immediately made Master Seda realize what God had thrown at him. And flour too, but another smell left Master Seda completely baffled. Along with the acid in the medicine bottle, God had also thrown a small bag of flour. Master Seda couldn't understand God's intentions at all. The scattering ash tactic was obviously only effective the first time it caught him off guard. Besides, how could flour, which couldn't be accurately aimed at his face, possibly have any effect on him? God wouldn't give Master Seda much time to think. Immediately, another glass bottle and several small bags of flour were thrown from the depths of the mist. Although it still didn't hit the mage, some acid from the exploding acid bottle splashed towards him. Fortunately, his shield spell was still active, protecting him. The mage had no time to ponder the purpose of the flour thrown along with the acid. He assumed it was just Gotti trying to mislead him. Where did this kid get so many bottles of acid? He cursed inwardly, quickly shifting his position. But the next moment, he let out an agonizing scream. He looked down at his right foot. There, a puddle of acid lay. The mage had stepped right on it. The acid instantly corroded his shoe sole, then the skin and flesh of his foot, hissing and corroding. The skin on his foot began to dissolve the moment it touched the acid, leaving charred and bubbling wounds that caused him excruciating pain. The mage had never suffered such injury before. Where did this acid come from? It's left over from the acid bottle I threw earlier. Actually, that wasn't entirely it. Besides the acid spilled on the ground from the broken bottle, there was also the acid left by God's previous acid splash plus additional effect. The acid can be retained for up to 1 day as needed. 3 consecutive acid splash plus attacks, though blocked by the mage Seda's shield, created a minefield around him, restricting his movement, along with the acid in the bottle. Normally, this spilled acid wouldn't pose a threat to Seda. But now, with his vision restricted by the concealment spell, he felt like he couldn't move an inch. Moving might cause him to step in the acid, staying still would make him a sitting duck. The shield's effectiveness had almost dissipated. Without it, he could no longer face the acid unscathed as before. Now, caught in a dilemma, the mage Seda recalled how God had inexplicably used Hand of the Mage to retrieve the potion at the beginning. He immediately understood that God had been setting up for the concealment mist spell back then. He also realized that God had somehow acquired so many acid bottles to set up this minefield, and that God had relentlessly used Acid Splash, despite knowing it was ineffective against his shield spell. Seda had initially thought God had run out of options and was forced to continue. Now it seemed that God was using this to deplete Seda's shield spell, making it impossible for him to ignore the acid bottles God kept throwing. This series of traps had finally caught even this seasoned veteran, leaving him in a difficult situation. Chapter 33 Destiny is in my hands. This guy, Seda thought back to how Gaod had been his apprentice for so many years, yet only today had he revealed everything, never showing any weakness before. Gaod's deep scheming and profound patience were far beyond his years, making Seda increasingly fearful the more he thought about it. You have indeed been incredibly cunning, even causing me to suffer losses. Having sorted out everything, Seda suddenly regained his composure. He spoke to the depths of the indistinct black mist, but if there are no other tricks up your sleeve, let's end this farce here. You underestimate my knowledge and overestimate your extraordinary artifact. A single ring alchemical artifact cannot bridge the vast gap between us. Seda endured the persistent, intense pain in his foot and sneered. The concealing mist spell, though a single ring spell, is ultimately harmless and has significant limitations, and coincidentally, I know its limitations. It's time to end this, Seda shouted. The reason he was in this dilemma was precisely because of the existence of this fog. Then let the fog disappear, and everything would be resolved. A high priest whose mana was already depleted, without the cover of the fog spell, would be completely at his mercy. And he knew 2 ways to counter the fog spell: strong wind and fire. There were no strong wind spells in magic, but there were many fire spells. And he happened to possess one. A red light flashed in his hand, followed by intense heat. An arrow formed from fire took shape again, and with a swing of his arm, it shot out, transforming into a blazing fire arrow the moment it left his hand. "Burn your fog away!" Bang! 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 Before his words had even finished, a shocking explosion suddenly rang out, completely catching the Mage Seda off guard. Explosion! Explosion! In the blink of an eye, flames inexplicably erupted in the space centered on the Mage Seda. At the same time as the explosion, a high-pressure, high-temperature shockwave was formed. A massive shockwave spread outwards, violently impacting surrounding objects and structures, with the Mage Seda being the closest object to the blast's epicenter. The remaining effectiveness of the shield spell was instantly shattered. The immense force swept across Sedar's body, tearing his robe, a first-order transcendental item, shredded and then ripping at his aged and frail form. The burning flames, interspersed with billowing smoke, continued their relentless spread, engulfing everything in the room, including the mist released by the concealment spell. In a mere instant, the concealment mist was completely consumed by the flames. As the mist dissipated, the obstructed vision finally cleared. The room was now a scene of utter devastation. A layer of smoke filled the air, light distorted in the murky atmosphere, forming hazy pillars of light that sliced the chaotic scene into irregular patches of light and shadow. The immense pressure from the explosion left the walls scarred and mottled, with a thick crack running the length of one wall. The furniture in the room was overturned and damaged by the shockwave of the explosion. Chairs were broken, tables were shattered, and books on the bookshelves were blown to pieces, the remaining parts still burning. Various fragments were scattered on the floor. Two figures lay sprawled in the mess, their clothes charred and torn. They lay there motionless, their fate unknown. An eerie silence prevailed. Apart from the occasional crackling of embers, almost no other sound could be heard. Huff, huff, huff. After a moment, heavy breathing filled the room. One of the two figures lying on the floor slowly began to move. God! He regained some consciousness, feeling a burning pain all over his body, his limbs incredibly heavy. God used all his strength to struggle to get up, each movement accompanied by intense pain and gasping for breath. Although the epicenter of the explosion was the Mage Seda, and although he had tried his best to keep his distance and had rushed out of the room the instant the explosion occurred. But the room was only so big, and the aftershocks of the explosion spread so quickly that he couldn't possibly escape unscathed. He was inflicting heavy losses on both sides. At this moment, every breath God took seemed to require immense effort, barely dragging air into his weary lungs. His exhalations were slow and heavy, like an old bellows releasing its last breath, tinged with reluctance. He struggled to sit up, supporting himself with his arms, and then stood up shakily. After swaying to his feet, God used his strong will to temporarily set aside his injuries and pain. He took weak, feeble steps, moving step by step to the other figure lying in the room, and then squatted down. Why? The Mage Seda was still breathing and had regained some consciousness. He sensed Gauda approaching and tried to raise his finger, but after several attempts, he failed, only managing to utter a weak sound as his lips moved. Compared to Gauda, the Mage Seda's injuries were far more severe. His body was covered in fragments of clothing mixed with flour and blood, his skin badly burned, showing varying degrees of charring and swelling. Some areas of skin had even peeled off due to the high temperature, revealing pink wounds underneath. The mage's eyes reflected a mixture of pain and confusion. "This is my backup plan," Gaudy grinned, a hearty laugh, the most unrestrained laugh he'd had since arriving in this world. "You underestimated my knowledge." That night, he had woken Amy and asked him to buy something in the city, the flour he had thrown along with the acid bottle. A dust explosion. The concentration of flour dust in each cubic meter of air must not exceed 9.7 grams. If the concentration of flour dust in a localized area reaches this threshold, and it encounters a sufficiently strong source of heat, an explosion is possible. This was common safety knowledge in his world. But in this world, few knew it. After learning the effects of the concealed mist spell, Gaudy knew that the combined effect of this spell and the enchanted concealed mist fang alone would be insufficient to defeat the mage. He was younger and physically stronger than the Mage Seda. However, the problem was that he had never learned combat, neither in his past life nor this one. Against an old mage skilled in close quarters magic, his physical advantage was far from negating the advantage brought by magic. His plan only fully took shape when he noticed the mist of concealment would be dispersed by the strong wind and burned away by the flames. God was betting that the mage Seda most likely knew how to break the mist of concealment, and he was certain that the mage possessed a fire spell. Knowing the method and possessing fire magic, the mage Seda had no reason not to use fire magic to break his mist of concealment. What God needed to do was to sprinkle flour in the enclosed room before the mage Seda cast the fire spell, increasing the dust concentration in the air. This was God's final calculation. Do your best and leave the rest to fate. Fate, in this case, was whether the mage Seda knew how to break the mist of concealment. If fate wasn't on his side, God would only have one last resort, to rely on the corrupted Fang of Hidden Mist to engage the mage Seda in a hand-to-hand combat. Even in this worst-case scenario, the flour wasn't entirely useless. The flour sprinkled on Seda would allow God, whose vision was obstructed by the mist, to better pinpoint Seda's location. However, none of this mattered anymore, because fate was on his side. While laughing wildly, God had already raised the Fang of Hidden Mist high in his hand. Blood splattered, splashing onto God and mixing with the blood flowing from his wounds. Just like when he assassinated Elon at night, God thrust the Fang of Hidden Mist into Seda's chest, then pulled it out, with remarkable practiced ease. One thrust wasn't enough. He pulled out the Fang of Hidden Mist and thrust it again. Then he pulled it out again and thrust it again. And so it went. Why? The mage Seda's breath grew weaker, his eyes wide as he stared at Gouda, his lips moving, uttering a broken sentence. Before he could finish, his head lolled to the side, lifeless. Though incomplete, Gouda knew what the mage Seda wanted to ask. He used his last ounce of strength to focus his attention on the wind spirit moon shadow. Origin. 0 rings, human, 2/7, gray-eyed rat, used, dark swamp worm, used, wolf rat, 1/7. Seeing the human ring followed by 2/7, Gouda grinned, confidently answering the mage Seda's question. He addressed the barely recognizable corpse on the ground. Why? Because my life was a fluke, but yours is your own. How can you outmaneuver me? He was the one who would ultimately walk out of this room alive. With a sudden release of the tension in his heart, Gouda could no longer control his consciousness, and with a thud, his body collapsed to the ground again, unconscious. Chapter 34 The Legacy of the Mage Seda. Gouda, Gouda, Gouda. In his dazed state, Gouda heard concerned and urgent calls. But he was too weak to open his eyes and respond. He didn't know how much time had passed when a warm feeling surged from deep within his body, quickly spreading throughout his entire being, jolting him awake. Gouda abruptly opened his eyes, cautiously looking around. A dark, cramped room. A faint ray of light pierced through a small window on the south wall. A very familiar scene. A month ago, when he first arrived in this world, this was the first scene he saw upon opening his eyes. Gouda instantly realized where he was. It was his cramped little bedroom. Gouda, you're finally awake. Amy, sitting at the head of the bed, was the first to notice Gouda was awake and excitedly moved closer. Gouda, having just woken up, felt weak and powerless. Looking closely, he discovered that his body was bound with various bandages, emanating a cool aura, likely containing some medicinal herbs. God made a conscious decision, recalling everything that had happened before he lost consciousness. Is Master Seda dead? He asked again to confirm. Yes, he's dead, Amy almost cried with joy, excitedly saying, God, you're amazing. How did you do that? God didn't answer Amy's question, but instead closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His greatest enemy, the sword of Damocles hanging over his head, had finally vanished. God's mind, tense for a month, completely relaxed. How long was I unconscious this time? He asked, opening his eyes and looking at Amy. One day, Amy said, holding up one finger. After the explosion in Master Seda's room yesterday, I mustered my courage to investigate and found you and Master Seda lying together, both covered in wounds. You were holding a blood-stained weapon, and Master Seda was dead. As Amy spoke, she gestured towards a wooden table beside her. There, the blood-stained murder weapon, the Fang of Hidden Mist, lay, cleaned of its previous bloodstains. I quickly carried you back to your room and used some herbs from the herb garden to bandage you up, Amy said thankfully. Master Seda is dead, so no one will bother me if I use his herbs. Thank you, God said earnestly to Amy. If Amy hadn't found him in time and bandaged him, he wouldn't have woken up so quickly. I should be thanking you. You killed Master Seda? You're our savior, Amy couldn't help but say. I was only saving myself. Saving you was just incidental. God didn't claim credit, not because of nobility or hypocrisy, but more because he didn't really need Amy's thanks. He smiled at Amy. Master Sada is dead. You're free. Hearing this, Amy didn't react with the elation God expected, but rather with a hesitant expression, as if she wanted to say something but was too embarrassed to. Just say what you want to say, God said, noticing Amy's reluctance. Amy bit her lip and shouted loudly towards the door, Gordon's awake. With that, the door to the room was flung open. The remaining 6 apprentices in the herb garden, who had been waiting outside, all crowded in, making the already cramped room completely packed. Everyone, including Amy, suddenly knelt down on one knee in front of Geode's bed. What do you mean by this? Geode stared at them, bewildered, not understanding what was happening. They exchanged glances, and finally, Amy, Geode's longtime roommate, stepped forward to speak on their behalf. After all, theoretically, she and Geode had the closest relationship. Master Sada is dead, but the herb garden is still here, and we've gotten used to working here, Amy said earnestly. We understand that although we've been apprentices to Master Sada for a long time, we haven't really learned much. With our limited abilities, it would be difficult to even make a living without the herb garden. We want the herb garden to continue operating. Without Master Sada, continuing to operate the herb garden is indeed difficult, but not impossible. You killed Master Sada and can independently concoct basic spider venom potions. In that case, why not take Master Sada's place and inherit his herb garden? We will do our best to work for you. Aside from a change of owner, everything else about our herb garden will remain the same. Amy finished stating her thoughts in one breath, then fell silent, anxiously awaiting God's reply. A new owner of the herb garden must have the ability to command respect and a certain level of expertise in potions to ensure its continued operation. Of the fewer than 10 apprentices in the entire herb garden, only God, who had successfully killed his master, possessed both of these qualities. Caught off guard by Amy's suggestion, God fell into deep thought. To be honest, he hadn't considered anything after killing the Mage Sada. At the time, it seemed too ambitious and unrealistic to Gouda. But now that it was done, he really needed to think carefully about his next steps. And it must be said that while Amy and the apprentice's suggestion was unexpected, it was also undeniably appealing. To grow into a powerful mage, resources were undoubtedly paramount. Learning spells required money, cultivation required money, and even food, clothing, and shelter required money. In short, everything revolved around money. And for him at the moment, the herb garden was the most valuable source of income he could control. Under Sada's years of management, the herb garden's entire operating model was perfected. As long as the herb garden continued to operate on its previous model, it could generate a steady stream of income. Gouda needed this herb garden to earn the resources he needed for his mage cultivation. And the other apprentices in the herb garden also needed Gouda to ensure that it could continue operating on its previous model. Therefore, if Gouda agreed to Amy's proposal, it would be a win-win situation for both parties. Thinking about it this way, there was no reason to refuse. All right, Gouda nodded slightly, making a decisive decision. Greetings, Master. The apprentices kneeling on the ground, hearing this affirmative reply, immediately showed joy on their faces. After exchanging glances, they all spoke in unison. Amy, seizing the opportunity, took a box from her bosom and presented it to Gouda with both hands. It was a box meticulously carved from an unknown wood. The surface was engraved with intricate runes and patterns symbolizing magical elements. These patterns were clearly not merely decorations, but represented magical power. What is this? The Mage Sada's room was reduced to ruins by the explosion. We searched the ruins for a long time, and most of the things in the room were destroyed, but this box was intact. Both the runes carved on the box and the fact that it remained intact after such a terrifying explosion indicate that this box must be an extraordinary item. And what the Mage Sada placed in this box with such care must have been something he valued most. However, no matter how I try, I can't open this box, now that you are the gardener. Besides the herb garden, the other relics left by the Mage Sada should also belong to you. Amy looked at God respectfully. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 It's Not Easy Being in Charge. Gata gave Amy a meaningful look, then reached out and took the box. Whether Amy couldn't open it or, as he claimed, he didn't care. The end result was the same. Gata understood that if he hadn't agreed to become the owner of the herb garden, even if the box was unopenable, Amy would most likely have taken it away rather than offering it to him. Thinking this, Gata tried to open the box. Even though Amy had said it was impossible, it didn't stop him from trying again. As it turned out, Amy hadn't lied to him. The box looked perfectly normal, but when he tried to open it, it was as if welded shut. No matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't budge. After trying for a while, Gata gave up on trying to open it using ordinary methods. Clearly, there was an invisible lock on the box. Without unlocking this lock, the box couldn't be opened. Isn't this just like a safe in a mage's world? Gata muttered to himself, somewhat frustrated but also finding it quite reasonable. He had already glimpsed the wonders of magic. In such a world, even the most fantastical things could be real. The most urgent matters are resting and healing, and getting the herb garden back in operation. Once these two things are done, then we'll look for a way to open the box. Gata knew the contents of the box must be extremely valuable, and there was a high probability it contained the spell formulas and medicine recipes he desperately needed. However, he was also well aware that some things couldn't be rushed, so he quickly adjusted his mindset and put the box away. Gata glanced at the group of apprentices still crammed into the room, making the cramped space feel even more stuffy. He yawned and said to everyone, "I'm a little tired and need to rest. Everyone, go back first. We can discuss the herb garden matter in detail when I wake up." Gata was indeed exhausted. The mental pressure he had maintained for a whole month had already left him completely worn out, and the physical injuries only exacerbated his fatigue. The apprentices were also sensible and got up to leave, including Amy, who was originally Gata's roommate. "If you need anything, just call out, and I'll come right away," Amy said. "Okay," Gata said to Amy. With a low creak, the door closed. "This is too small, not comfortable to sleep in. I need to find another room," Gata thought. For example, Master Sada's bedroom would be much better. "It's good to be alive," he finally said to himself. Gata lay back on the bed. It was high in the sun. Warm sunlight streamed in through the open window, bathing Gata in its glow, making him, still recovering from his injuries, squint comfortably. His cramped bedroom only had a small vent, so it certainly wouldn't have this kind of light. This was Master Sada's bedroom. A spacious and well-lit room. Now it was his. As the victor, Gata unceremoniously claimed it for himself. This was the spoils of war. A commotion arose outside the door, mixed with a creaking of objects moving across the floor. Gata knew the apprentices were cleaning up the debris. Because of the violent explosion, Master Sada's workshop, his study, had been completely reduced to ruins. Fortunately, the explosion didn't affect other areas of the herb garden, preventing greater damage. The mess left after the explosion was no easy task to clean up. The apprentices spent 2 days and still hadn't completely cleared the area. While Gata was still unconscious, they moved the body of the Mage Sada and buried it in the back mountain, placing him alongside the apprentices who had died earlier from testing medicine. It was a harmonious ending for master and apprentice in the same grave. As for everything in Sada's room, except for the unopenable spell box, everything was shattered into pieces, becoming useless junk. Even Sada's magic robe was blown to pieces by the immense power of the explosion. Clearly, this level of damage was beyond the capabilities of repair magic and could not be fixed. It had to be disposed of as trash. This pained Gata greatly, as a first-level extraordinary item was worth 60 or 70 gold coins. But given the vast difference in strength between him and the Mage Sada, how could he possibly consider the spoils of war? As long as he was alive, there would always be bread. Gata could only console himself with this thought. Although it didn't stop the pain in his heart, it did offer a slight respite. Gata shifted his body slightly, adopting a more comfortable posture, and pondered his next steps. The most important task was undoubtedly to get the herb garden running again, back on track, to ensure its revenue. He could also maintain contact with Pierre's general store. While the business of repairing supernatural items wasn't as stable as the potion business, it could still provide extra income. Secondly, he needed to find a way to open the spell box left by the Mage Sada. Finally, he needed to focus on his own cultivation, which was even higher priority than learning new spells or using the Wind Spirit Moon Shadow to enhance his existing spells. After all, even mastering numerous and powerful spells was meaningless without sufficient mana. Spring Bud Month, Day 5. The traces of the Mage Seda in the herb garden have been completely cleaned up. God's injuries have also healed considerably. They were only external wounds, not serious injuries, and the medicinal properties of the herbs in this world are significantly more potent than in his previous life due to the presence of magic. During his recovery these past few days, God has reviewed the current situation of the herb garden. Before he came to this world, there were 12 people in the herb garden, which was its largest number at that time. After his arrival, he killed both Elon and the Mage Seda. In addition, 2 apprentices died last month due to the night raid by the Leline creatures. That means there are currently 8 people in the herb garden, including God, his roommate Amy, the apprentice and cook Ramos, and Aichi and Raymond, the only 2 others besides God who can concoct potions. The other 7 are all first-class apprentices. However, there are differences even among first-class apprentices. They have only barely mastered one spell each, either the Mage's Hand or Restoration spell. Calling them mage apprentices is a bit of an overstatement. Even more awkwardly, while Aichi and Raymond could concoct potions, their success rate was low, averaging 2 parts ingredients to make 1 potion. It's important to understand that Tier 0 potions themselves aren't very profitable. They're essentially low-end products, their strength lying in their high production volume and success rate. Once a potion mastered this level, they could practically guarantee a 100% success rate. In fact, low-level potion masters who couldn't guarantee this success rate simply couldn't survive. Furthermore, the potion Aichi and Raymond concocted wasn't a basic spider venom potion, but a short-acting sleeping potion. This potion's effect was to quickly induce a short but deep sleep in the drinker, leaving them refreshed upon waking. However, it couldn't be used long-term, otherwise its effects would wear off, and sleep disturbances would occur. Its users were generally cargo carriers, using it while traveling for emergencies. While practical, its limited applicability and inability to be used long-term restricted its market. Phil's Potion Shop doesn't have a high demand for the sleeping and relaxing potion. They only order it occasionally, unlike the unlimited purchases of basic spider venom and basic stamina potions. In other words, Aichi and Raymond are 2 unqualified potion makers, hardly contributing to production. Therefore, it seems that only God can consistently generate income in the herb garden. No wonder the apprentices in the herb garden insist on electing God as its head. He's truly the only one capable. My new book is getting its first round of recommendations. My good brothers, please read it during the new book period. It's very important to me. My last book, Sword Cultivation, was eliminated in the first round. This is my second book, so it has to make it to the second round. Chapter 36 The Tale of the Herb Garden. Let's start by calculating the expenses of this small herb garden for 8 people. In this world, the minimum living expenses for a normal family of 5 are 57 gold per year. The situation is better for the herb garden because the land and property are their own, so they can avoid a major expense of rent. However, the expenses for food, fuel, and clothing are unavoidable. Therefore, the minimum fixed living expenses for the herb garden are 72 gold per year, or 1,440 silver, averaging 4 silver coins per day. In other words, they need to earn at least 4 silver coins per day to ensure the herb garden doesn't go bankrupt. And this is just the minimum. Now that Gata is the owner, he can no longer eat rye bread and pea soup every day like a slave. He will definitely need to improve the diet. This is another significant additional expense. Currently, the herb garden's only fixed output is the set of basic spider venom potion that Gata concocts daily. The purchase price of a set of basic spider venom potion from Phil's Potion Shop is 2 gold, the raw materials are around 30 silver, and the profit is about 10 silver. However, since some of the medicinal herbs can be produced in the herb garden itself, eliminating the need to purchase from pharmacies, the cost can be kept between 20 and 25 silver, increasing the profit to 15-20 silver. Furthermore, each batch of basic spider venom potion produced by Gata yields an additional ½ ounce of potion. In other words, for every 12 batches of basic spider venom potion made, he produces 1 more. Buy 12, get 1 free, 360 batches a year, plus 30 free batches. Gata couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief after calculating this. Fortunately, Master Seda had diligently managed his herb garden in his early years, cultivating a fairly large herb garden and training some apprentices skilled in herb cultivation. Otherwise, he would have truly wanted to run away. With a profit of 15 to 20 silver, and expenses estimated at 5 silver, there's still a surplus of 10 to 15 silver per day. This amounts to 300 to 450 silver per month, and 3,600–5,400 silver per year. Taking the midpoint, the annual surplus is 4,500 silver, equivalent to 225 gold coins. 220,000 a year. The purchasing power of one Sinon gold coin is roughly equivalent to 1,000 yuan. In Gauda's previous life, he quickly calculated his initial annual income. I definitely need to share some with the others. If everyone gets a dividend of 10 gold coins a year, that's still 150 Sinon gold coins in income. With dividends, everyone is truly bound to the same boat, and they will work harder and consider themselves more of a part of the herb garden. Gauda understood this principle. As for the 30 sets of basic spider venom potions that were gifted, that was pure profit, his ability reward, and no dividends were needed. At 2 gold coins per set, that's another 60 gold coins in income. 150 plus 60, that's 210 Shan gold coins. If we can open the spell box left by the Mage Seda, and find a potion recipe inside, our income might increase even further. Besides, those 2 apprentices who can concoct the sleeping potion, with practice, might improve their success rate. Some of the herbs produced in the herb garden are raw materials for basic stamina potions. I haven't mastered this potion, so these herbs can also be sold. This is also an extra source of income, not very high, but stable enough. Well, isn't this just like a simulation management game? After a moment of calculation, Gauda couldn't help but chuckle. It felt like a sudden shift in style. I feel like something's missing. Gauda pondered for a moment, then realized something, immediately got up, grabbed paper and pen, and began writing furiously. A moment later, name, say the herb garden, number of people. 8 fixed assets, 1 herb garden, 4 herb fields, producing snake-tooth grass, mountain wormwood, high mountain ironwood root, and blazing sun fruit respectively. Cash on hand. 8 copper fixed expenses. 4-5 silver day, living expenses, income. 15 to 20 silver day, fixed output of basic spider venom potion. Unpredictable variable income is not included for now. Variable expenses, herb seedlings, fertilizer, materials needed to prepare nutrients oil. Looking at his self-made panel on the paper, Gauda nodded in satisfaction. It's on point. After this calculation, this herb garden still has great potential. Gauda immediately became full of energy. He had no choice but to be full of energy. Now the entire herb garden is counting on his output. As the hope of the entire garden, Gauda immediately got up and went to his workshop, where he concocted a set of basic spider venom potions on the spot. Spring sprout month, the 6th day, early morning. Gauda, whose injuries had not yet fully recovered, left the herb garden with a set of basic spider venom potions he had just concocted the day before, heading to the commercial district of the city. It wasn't that he was so eager, it was simply that his home was starving. It was unclear whether Master Seder had put all his savings in a spell box or if he simply had no savings at all. In any case, the apprentices didn't find a single copper coin while clearing the ruins, and the herb garden's daily expenses were at least 4 silver coins. Fortunately, the herb garden bought food in quantities for several days at a time, and Gauda also had 10 silver and 8 copper coins in savings, which allowed them to barely survive for a few days. But today, they really couldn't continue. After these few days of expenses, Gauda's savings were almost completely depleted, leaving only 8 copper coins. Without any income, everyone would go hungry. This wasn't Gauda's first time venturing into Hogan City's commercial district, but it was certainly his first time leaving the herb garden in the early morning. When the Mage Seda was still around, he always had to work in the mornings, only having some free time in the afternoons after concocting potions. The crisp morning air carried a lingering, foul odor. This was because Gauda had arrived in Hogan City's slums. Given the herb garden's suburban location, avoiding the slums was virtually impossible to bypass once you reach the city center. I must hire a carriage for commuting when I have money, the dignified herb garden lord, whose mode of transport was still his own 2 legs, set a small goal, then held his breath and quickened his pace. Passing through the slums and residential areas, he arrived at the commercial district by midday. Although it wasn't yet peak time, people were already appearing on the streets. Penniless, Gauda ignored the enticing aromas wafting from the food stalls lining the streets and headed straight for Pierre's general store. He only had 1 set of basic spider venom potions. Phil's potion shop wouldn't accept such a small quantity. So even though Pierre's general store offered 7 silver coins less than Phil's potion store, God had no choice but to choose the former. When God arrived at Pierre's general store, Pierre had just opened the door. He had always come in the afternoon, and never expected Pierre's opening hours to be so late. In his mind, small shops like this should be open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., earning a meager living. Compared to God's surprise, Pierre was extremely astonished to see God. "Kid, long time no see. I thought something had happened to you," Pierre greeted him first. Since the 14th day of the awakening month, God had been confined by the Mage Seda, and now it was the 6th day of the spring bud month. That meant about 20 days had passed, so it was no wonder Pierre's first reaction to seeing God was surprise. Chapter 37, The Arcane Lock. "Something came up. I haven't been out for a while," God explained with a helpless smile, then asked, "Are you still buying basic spider venom potion?" Of course, Pierre nodded with a smile, adding a piece of information to Gauda's mind. Recently, for some reason, the number of wild beasts outside the city has increased significantly, and they've become much more aggressive. Even the frequency of encounters with feline creatures has increased considerably, so more people are going out hunting. The demand for basic spider venom potion has increased dramatically recently, and it's almost in short supply. Basic spider venom potion is originally used by hunters to coat arrows and weapons to deal with ferocious beasts. Its intense paralyzing effect is a powerful weapon against low-level feline creatures and wild beasts. With more hunting, the sales of basic spider venom potion have naturally increased. This was good news for Gauda. He felt a slight urge and handed a set of basic spider venom potion he had brought to Pierre. Pierre took the potion, a glint in his eyes, then nodded in satisfaction. "Your goods are still of such high quality." He put away the basic spider venom potion and took some coins from a drawer under the counter, handing them to God. "Did you give me too much?" God did a quick mental calculation and realized that Pierre had given him 1 Sean gold coin plus 15 3-leaf silver coins, totaling 35 silver. This was 2 silver more than the agreed-upon purchase price of 33 silver. It wasn't a huge amount, but God had no intention of taking advantage of such a small sum. "Didn't I tell you that the basic spider venom potion has been in short supply lately, so its price has increased by 10%, so naturally I had to raise my purchase price as well. Would I be trying to take advantage of you?" Pierre explained. Knowing that he hadn't given him too much, God accepted it without hesitation. "By the way, is your promise to repair magical items still valid?" After the transaction was completed, Pierre stopped God and asked again. Gauda's eyes lit up. Could there be business? Repairing magical items not only earns him some extra money but also allows him to indirectly learn about magic, a win-win situation. "Yes, after I spread the word, someone actually came to inquire about the situation a few days ago," Pierre nodded, not rushing to sit down. "It's just that you haven't come around lately, so I didn't know what was going on with you and didn't agree immediately, but he did leave me an address." The old man leaned closer to Gauda and said, "The price he offered was unusually high." "How high?" Gauda asked instinctively. Pierre extended his right hand and opened it. 5 Sean gold coins. Gauda was slightly surprised. Pierre nodded emphatically. "Were you shocked?" "I was shocked when I heard that too. A first-rank magical item." Gauda hesitated. "Yes," Pierre shrugged. "Otherwise, why would he offer such a high repair fee? A level 0 extraordinary item is only worth 12 to 15 gold coins. If the repair fee is 5 gold coins, it's better to buy a new one. Only a first-level extraordinary item could command such a high repair fee." "Can you repair it?" Pierre asked. Repairing a first-level extraordinary item is significantly more difficult than repairing a 0-level one, and Pierre wasn't sure if God's abilities were sufficient, which was one of the reasons he hadn't agreed initially. "Yes," God nodded. "But it will take time, and," he paused, then said in a deep voice, "it will cost extra. A reasonable repair fee is generally around 10% of the item's value, and the average price of a first-level extraordinary item is 65 gold. Furthermore, finding another person in Hogan City capable of repairing a first-level extraordinary item is virtually impossible. Scarcity drives up the price, so a slight increase is understandable." Pierre, being knowledgeable about the market, naturally didn't think God was overcharging. In fact, he nodded in agreement, saying, 5 gold for repairs is high, but for repairing a first-level extraordinary item, the price is indeed too low. It's good that it can be repaired. I can help you negotiate the price." How about you come back to the shop the day after tomorrow, the old man said with a smile. Then I'll trouble you. God naturally agreed. I'll come back to the shop the day after tomorrow, sir. Do you know of any spells among 0-level and 1-level spells that can protect a box and prevent outsiders from opening it? After hesitating for a moment, God still asked. He absolutely had to find a way to open the spell box left by the mage Seda. Although asking directly would reveal some information, he felt he could bear that risk. Besides, deliberately being secretive might not only fail to deceive others but also make them more suspicious. Over these past few days, a small amount of trust had been established between God and Pierre. Of course, the most important thing was that through these interactions, God had vaguely sensed that this old man was not as simple as he appeared on the surface. He was definitely not just a small general store owner. He possessed vast knowledge and was the most likely person God knew to be able to answer his questions. Not to mention, the wooden sign at the general store's entrance listed Pierre's extensive business, part-time item recycling and treasure appraisal. Considering the spell box left by the mage Seda as a treasure didn't seem too problematic. Protecting a box and making it impossible for outsiders to open it, Pierre didn't disappoint God. After frowning his slightly pale eyebrows and pondering for a moment, he gave his answer. Based on your description, the only thing I can think of is an arcane lock. An arcane lock? God raised an eyebrow. Yes, a first circle spell, arcane lock, Pierre explained in detail. An arcane lock can be cast on a door, a box, or other closed container, magically locking it and greatly enhancing its security. Unless there's a corresponding unlocking incantation or a powerful spell, it's virtually impossible to open. This means that ordinary physical methods, including picking locks and banging, will be ineffective against a container enchanted with an arcane lock. Because of this effect, the arcane lock also protects the container, Pierre explained. Of course, there might be other spells that can achieve the effect you described. After all, I only have a slight understanding of the most common and universal spells. The old man shook his head slightly, sighing. There are just too many spells. Is there any way to open an arcane lock? God was almost certain that the wooden box left by the mage Seda was enchanted, and he couldn't help but frown, feeling helpless. The tracking mark spell alone had already rendered him helpless. As a first circle spell, the arcane lock would undoubtedly leave him even more powerless. If you want to open the arcane lock without knowing the unlocking spell set when it was cast, one thing I can think of is Dispel Magic, which can directly remove the arcane lock spell effect. Another is the Strike spell, which can temporarily suppress the arcane lock spell effect for a short time. Pierre shrugged. However, Dispel Magic is a third-level spell, so forget about it. Chapter 38 Spell Scrolls. What about the knocking spell? God noticed Pierre's unfinished sentence and pressed for an answer. Knocking is just a first-level spell, just a first-level spell. God pursed his lips, wanting to retort that Pierre was talking without any real understanding. In Hogan City, first-level mages weren't already at the pinnacle. There were only a handful in the entire city. So, a first-level spell couldn't really be described as just, though he understood it was being compared to dispelling magic. With this understanding, God's restless heart calmed down. He knew it was unlikely he could open the wooden box left by the mage Seda in a short time. What? You're trying to unlock the arcane lock without unlocking the incantation? Pierre suddenly spoke pointedly. Upon hearing this, God's guard immediately went up. Looking at Pierre, whose expression remained unchanged, God hesitated for a moment, realizing that he had already said so much and further attempts to conceal the truth would be pointless. He finally nodded. Yes, but it doesn't seem that simple. It is indeed not easy. There are only a handful of first-rank mages in Hogan City, and finding one who has mastered the strike spell is practically impossible, Pierre affirmed. While the strike spell is common and widely used, its effects are far too niche to be a mage's first choice for learning. Only those with specific needs, or seasoned first-rank mages, are likely to master this spell. Pierre's words undoubtedly made God's heart sink further. However, upon reflection, it made sense. Learning spells requires a significant investment of money, effort, and time. Therefore, mages tend to avoid niche spells with limited practicality when learning spells, pursuing high-power or highly applicable spells instead. Seemingly sensing God's disappointment, Pierre chuckled and added, however, in certain specific situations, these less common spells often have irreplaceable roles and cannot be completely ignored. Therefore, for spells that are not normally used but are needed in certain moments, mages often don't choose to spend a lot of effort learning and mastering them. but instead choose to buy spell scrolls as a reserve for dealing with emergencies. Spell scrolls. This was a familiar yet unfamiliar term. Familiar because in Gauda's previous life's games or novels, spell scrolls were commonplace classic items. Unfamiliar because in this world, spell scrolls were something he had never seen before. Spell scrolls contain pre-written spells, allowing mages who don't possess the spell to use it all at once. Using a spell scroll doesn't consume your own mana, you only need to meet the mental power requirements specified on the scroll. Moreover, almost every type of low-level spell has a corresponding spell scroll, greatly enhancing a mage's flexibility in casting and their ability to handle unexpected situations. It's an extremely important magical item for every mage, Pierre explained to God. There are no shops selling spell scrolls in Hogan City, God confirmed. He had visited the commercial district several times recently and hadn't seen any shops selling spell scrolls. That's for sure. Only scroll masters who have mastered the corresponding spells can create spell scrolls for those spells, Pierre sighed. While scroll masters aren't as prestigious as rune masters, their rarity is almost equal. Usually, only large mage organizations have the corresponding professional knowledge to pass down. Therefore, you can only buy spell scrolls from these reputable mage organizations, and they usually release limited quantities. Once they're on the shelves, the popular spell scrolls are basically sold out within an hour, and the less popular ones are almost gone within a day. To buy 1 or 2 spell scrolls requires a certain amount of luck. This is true even in big cities, so where would you find spell scrolls in a small place like Hogan City? God wasn't disappointed, though, because he knew Pierre had gone to such lengths not just to educate him on spell scrolls. So he patiently waited for Pierre to continue. However, Pierre paused, leaving him in suspense. God played along, pressing, however, what? I have a friend in Bremen, a mage in the Emerald Alliance, Pierre patiently explained. The Emerald Alliance is one of the 3 major mage associations in Bremen, so, I can probably get a few spell scrolls through him via internal channels. Perfect timing. I have some business to attend to in Bremen soon. If you need it, I might be able to get you a spell scroll for the strike spell. Pierre finished speaking in one breath, then quietly looked at God, awaiting his decision. How much does a strike spell scroll cost? God grasped the crux of the matter. Spell scrolls are scarce, but they are only one-time consumables, so the price isn't particularly high. 6 to 7 Sean gold coins. That's the average price for a level 1 spell scroll. The average price of a level 1 extraordinary item is 65 gold coins. A level 1 spell scroll costs only 1/10 of that. The price difference seems significant, but the former is reusable, while the latter is a one-time consumable. Considering this, it's clear this is a fair and reasonable price. This is the natural law of commodity pricing. 6 to 7 Sean gold coins is also a considerable expense. With the current output of the herb garden, it would take about half a month to accumulate that amount. However, Gada believes that the valuables so carefully protected by Mage Seda with arcane locks must be worth far more than that. This is a surefire deal. What else do I need to pay? Gada asked quite consciously. Pierre had used his connections to bring him the spell scroll all the way from Bremen, and since they were not related, it was impossible for him not to pay extra. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Unexpectedly, Pierre shook his head, looking directly at God's slightly immature yet remarkably calm face. You only need to pay for the spell scroll itself. God lowered his gaze, and after a moment of silence, his slightly furrowed brows relaxed. He raised his eyelids and looked directly at Pierre. Then I'll trouble you. As for the money for the spell scroll, no rush. You can pay me after I actually bring back the spell scroll for the strike spell. Pierre waved his hand dismissively. My new book is getting its first round of recommendations. My good brothers, please read it during the new book period. It's very important to me. My last book, Sword Cultivation, was eliminated in the first round, and now it's my second book. It has to make it to the second round. Chapter 39 Potions, Runes, Extraordinary Items. Having uncovered the secret of the wooden box and unexpectedly received Pierre's help, Gada didn't leave immediately. Suppressing his complex emotions, he consulted Pierre again. Boss, do you know of any external objects that can assist a mage's cultivation? The progress of methodically practicing the guidance technique was incredibly frustrating. If possible, it would be necessary to use some external objects to accelerate the cultivation process. Gada knew that such items would definitely be expensive, probably beyond his means, but it wouldn't hurt to inquire about the market first. Pierre was indeed very knowledgeable, After a moment's thought, he organized his thoughts and said, "A mage's cultivation consists of two main methods, guidance and meditation. Meditation cultivates one's own spiritual power, without the participation of external energy. Therefore, its cultivation depends more on oneself, and auxiliary items are extremely rare and precious, so we'll ignore them for now. However, there are more auxiliary items for practicing guidance. Fortunately, my progress in meditation isn't slow." Gada thought to himself with relief. Compared to his predecessor, his speed of cultivating the guiding method remained unchanged, but his progress in cultivating the meditation technique greatly improved. Pierre had already sat down behind the counter. There are many items that aid in guided magic practice, but if you categorize them, they can be roughly divided into three types: potions, runes, and extraordinary items. Essentially, there are two methods. One is to increase the mage's efficiency in guiding magic power into mana, and the other is to increase the concentration of magic power in the practice environment. As for potions, the most common practice potion is the mana potion. Mana potions contain powerful magic power. After drinking them, the mage can directly absorb the magic power from the potion, replacing the magic power that would otherwise be guided into the body through guided magic. This is equivalent to skipping the step of guiding magic power in guided magic practice. The mage only needs to convert and refine this magic power into their own mana. Thus, the practice speed is naturally faster. However, mana potions are extremely expensive. For example, a set, 3 small bottles, of basic mana potions for mage apprentices costs as much as 6 gold. And a set of basic mana potions is only enough for a first-class apprentice for 6 days of practice, while a second-class apprentice needs to consume a set every 3 days. So generally, apprentice mages only buy a set of magic potions to help them break through bottlenecks when they're about to break through in their guidance techniques. If they use it as a daily training aid, that's far too extravagant. It's not something ordinary people can afford. One set costs 6 gold, and one set is consumed every 6 days, totaling 360 gold a year, equivalent to 360,000 in his previous life. Gada did the math in his mind and knew Pierre's words were true. How many people could afford an expenditure of 360,000 a year? This is just a magic potion expenditure for a first-class apprentice. For a second-class apprentice, it's 720 gold a year. Of course, if someone were truly willing to spend that much, they could probably push their apprentice guidance techniques to perfection in a short time. There must be many so-called geniuses who have been nurtured with these magic potions. However, this is not a method Gada can afford. Pierre, naturally, understood this and quickly continued, if potions favor the first method of enhancement, runes lean towards the second, increasing the magic concentration in the training environment. Multiple runes combined can construct magic circles to increase the magic concentration in a specific area. The two most well-known auxiliary training magic circles are the magic crystal matrix and the magic node array. The former requires a continuous consumption of magic crystals, releasing the powerful magic within the crystals to increase the magic concentration in the environment. The latter gathers the surrounding magic into a small area. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. The former increases magic concentration more significantly, but because it constantly consumes magic crystals, the cost is also high. The latter is the opposite. Although the increase in magic concentration is far less than the former, once the magic circle is successfully constructed, it automatically gathers the surrounding magic without any consumption. Since the magic in the world is constantly regenerating and flowing, it's essentially a highly profitable investment. However, you don't need to consider this method. Magic circles don't have a 0th tier, the lowest is 1st tier, and the construction cost of a 1st tier magic circle is over 1,000 gold coins. Mages usually cultivate using magic circles by renting them. The problem is, there are no magic circles in Hogan City that allow renting. Pierre spread his hands. Hogan City was too small, and the number of mages was too small to support the operation of a magic circle. Finally, there are extraordinary items. Some extraordinary items are created to assist cultivation. They can automatically absorb magic power to help their master cultivate. Of course, the effects of these extraordinary items are far less obvious and direct than magic circles, but their advantage is that they can be carried around and are effective at all times, unlike magic circles which are fixed in position once set up, cannot be moved, and cannot be carried. Obviously, extraordinary items that assist cultivation are far more valuable than other types of extraordinary items. Even among level 1 extraordinary items, those that assist cultivation, even if the effect is not particularly significant, can often sell for hundreds of gold coins. And they are always in high demand but not readily available. Pierre's meaning was also very straightforward. Regardless of whether God had the financial resources, even if he did, there was nowhere to buy them. After saying a lot, none of them were useful to God. God was also helpless. The root of the problem boils down to one word: poverty. Leaving Pierre's general store, Gouda, clutching 1 gold and 15 silver, headed straight for a herbal medicine shop at the end of the street. The basic spider venom potion required 3 main ingredients: 1 snake tooth grass, 1 stalk of sage, and 1 green spider pouch. While the snake tooth grass and sage could be grown in his garden, the green spider pouch had to be purchased from the herbal medicine shop. Although Phil's potion shop primarily sold potions, it also sold herbs, including green spider pouches, and their quality was guaranteed. The problem was that when the mage Seda was still around, he would buy in quantities sufficient for at least half a month. Now, Gouda was short of money and could only afford to buy 1 or 2 portions. Purchasing herbs from Phil's potion shop under these circumstances was inappropriate and could easily arouse suspicion. Adhering to the principle of caution, Gouda had no choice but to go to a smaller herbal medicine shop instead. 12 silver coins for a green spider sack that's over a year old. At Phil's potion shop, it's 10 silver coins a sack, right? How come yours is 20% more expensive? In the medicine shop, Gouda frowned subconsciously at the price quoted by the shop assistant and asked, "Sir, our shop has been on this street for decades. The reason we've stood the test of time is because of our integrity. No matter your status, everyone who enters our shop receives the same respect and fair treatment. Hogan City is only so big. If our shop cheated our customers, our reputation would spread, and we wouldn't be able to continue operating. How could we be so short-sighted as to cheat you?" Hearing Gouda's skepticism, the shop owner stepped forward and said earnestly in an unquestionable tone, "These days, there are clearly more people going out of town to hunt, and the price of basic spider venom potion has risen accordingly. Green spider sacks, as one of the main ingredients in basic spider venom potion, have also become scarce, naturally leading to price increase. Not only our shop, but all the herbal shops are now charging the same price for green spider sacks. If you don't believe me, you can go to other herbal shops in the city and see if it matches what I said." "Okay, then 2 portions, please," Gouda said, unable to suppress his reluctance. This herbal medicine shop, though not particularly large, is indeed an old establishment, having been open for almost 20 years. They wouldn't lie about ruining their reputation like that. The little rooster he barely warmed was gone again, and after painfully paying, his savings shrank once more to 11 taels of silver. New book recommendation period. Please follow. Chapter 40. It's not easy to live there. After leaving the potion shop, Gouda wandered around the commercial district, purchasing consumable ingredients for brewing potions, such as honey water. These ingredients weren't expensive, costing less than 3 silver coins in total, but they were quite tedious and time-consuming. The biggest problem was that in this world's monetary system, the lowest denomination, the round copper coin, had a purchasing power roughly equivalent to 4.2 yuan in Gouda's previous life. That's too large a sum. In daily life, such a large, imprecise monetary amount would cause many inconveniences. Therefore, the people of the Principality of Shan invented a method to adapt to daily transaction needs, simply cutting the round copper coin in half for small transactions. This practice would lead to currency devaluation and was prohibited by the Shan government. However, because it was so common, it gradually became the tacit rule. These round copper coins cut in half were called half-yuan coins, and their actual purchasing power was equivalent to 2 yuan. With the addition of half-yuan coins, daily transactions were much more convenient than before, but still not precise enough. At times like these, rounding up and breaking down accounting units are crucial for accurate calculations. For example, right now, rye bread, 1 pound and 1.5 copper coins, wheat bread, 1 pound, 4 copper coins, the bakery clerk announced loudly in a melodious tone. The bread in this world, especially rye bread, is much heavier and denser than Gouda knew. Scientifically speaking, it's extremely high in fiber, making it more filling. 1 pound, about 450 grams, of rye bread is enough for an adult for about 2 days, or for the apprentices in the herb garden for 2.5 days. 8 people would need about 3 pounds of rye bread per day. However, bread-making techniques in this era are relatively primitive, without modern chemical preservatives, resulting in a shorter shelf life, It will become dry and spoiled after about a week. Buying a 6-day supply is most suitable, which is 18 pounds of rye bread. Gauda couldn't help but glance again at the wheat bread, which was much wider and lighter in color than the rye bread, with a light golden hue. He took a deep breath of the aroma emanating from the wheat bread, a blend of wheat, caramel, and a hint of smoke, before resolutely turning his head away. 18 pounds of rye bread, please, he told the clerk. The taste of wheat bread was undoubtedly far superior to rye bread. Similarly, the price was much higher. This was because wheat required more specific growing conditions, preferring warm and fertile soil, and its yield per unit area was less stable than rye and barley, hence its higher price. Wheat bread, as a processed product, was more than twice the price of rye bread, primarily consumed by wealthy merchants and upper-class farmers. In contrast, rye bread was the staple food for the vast majority of ordinary people. To be honest, Gauda wasn't unable to afford wheat bread. The problem was, with his modern moral compass, he couldn't bring himself to discriminate. The output in the herb garden was a collective effort, and although he was the main producer, he felt awkward about enjoying wheat bread alone while the other apprentices ate rye bread. Only when he owned his own private property could he let go of this moral burden. However, if everyone's staple food were changed from rye bread to wheat bread, the daily expenditure on staple food alone would increase significantly. Gauda subconsciously started doing mental calculations. 4 minus 1.5, multiplied by 3, equals 7.5 copper coins. Over a year, that's 360, equaling 2,700 copper coins. Converted to silver coins, that's 225 silver coins. Converted to Chinese gold coins, this non-decimal monetary system is truly anti-human. While complaining about this heaven-defying monetary system, Gauda arrived at the answer, 11 gold coins plus 5 silver coins. And this is just the extra expenditure on staple food. With the staple food quality improved, other aspects naturally have to follow suit. Just like during famines, everyone ate cornbread with pickled vegetables. When life improved and people could afford rice, the side dishes naturally had to be upgraded. They couldn't just eat pickled vegetables anymore, right? It's the same principle. The team is still in the startup phase, it still has to be tough. Gauda nodded seriously, telling himself. 18 pounds of rye bread, 27 coppers. The shopkeeper deftly packed 36 strips of rye bread into a paper bag while quickly calculating the price. Gauda carefully took out 2 silver coins and the 3 copper coins he'd received as change from buying potion supplies, handing them to the shopkeeper and taking the bag of bread. 18 pounds of bread, about 8 kilograms, wasn't particularly heavy. But the thought of carrying that weight for an hour back to the herb garden, due to long-term malnutrition and noticeably thinner Gauda, still felt a headache coming on. The task of buying food had previously been entrusted to 2 of the older apprentices at the herb garden. Sharing the load, the weight wasn't a problem. Let's take a carriage back, Gauda made a luxurious decision. Since he'd decided to take a carriage, he wouldn't have to worry about the weight. After leaving the bakery, Gauda headed towards the Pea and Lamb Market, just 1 street away from the commercial district. The Peas and Lambs Market, in Gauda's understanding, was essentially a vegetable market. It had many simple stalls, mostly run by local farmers selling their own produce, interspersed with a few permanent shops. Here, Gauda first spent 1 silver tael on 2 pounds of the cheapest pork, then bought a 6-day supply of tender peas, turnips, potatoes, and cabbage. These were easily preserved vegetables, and by intentionally rounding up the price, he spent another 3 silver taels. Carrying his bags, Gauda stood at the street corner for a while. A sharp-eyed coachman spotted him, deducing that Gauda was likely a potential customer, and drove his 2-wheeled carriage over, stopping in front of him. There were 2 types of carriages in the city, 4-wheeled box carriages and the light 2-wheeled carriages like the one before him. The 2-wheeled carriages had an open design, without a roof, only a low panel surrounding the seat, making them lighter and faster. The coachman, wearing a distinctive hat and holding the reins, greeted him warmly. "Sir, would you like a ride? My horses are the strongest and fastest." "How much to the Seda herb garden?" Gauda asked. The herb garden had always been named after the Mage Seda, and after many years of operation, it had gained a certain reputation in Hagen City, at least for the coachman who knew Hagen City very well. The starting price is 7 copper for the first 2 kilometers, and 3 copper for each kilometer thereafter, 6 copper for each kilometer in the suburbs. From here to the Seda herb garden, It's a little over 5 kilometers by main road, and the last kilometer is in the suburbs, so it's 19 copper. The coachman calculated the total price deftly. Walking, it's only 4 kilometers from the herb garden, but some side roads are impassable for carriages, requiring detours, thus lengthening the journey. Alright, let's go. Gauda took 2 silver coins from his pocket and handed them to the coachman. Taking the 5 copper coins in change, Gauda easily boarded the carriage. The carriage had 2 seats facing each other, comfortably accommodating 2 adults. Underneath the seats was storage space. Gauda carefully placed his purchases there, and after settling in, the coachman flicked the reins and whip, setting the carriage off. Only 1 silver and 5 copper coins left again. It's true what they say, you earn money in the city and spend it all in the city, not a penny to bring home. Gauda sighed inwardly as he enjoyed the carriage ride. Life is tough. New book recommendation period. Please follow. Chapter 41 Beast Language Ring. A gentle breeze blew along the way, making it quite pleasant. Occasional bumps added to the charm. Paying money certainly made a difference. Guest, we've arrived at the Seda Herb Garden. Less than half an hour later, the carriage stopped at the garden's gate, and the driver turned to greet Gauda. Gauda nodded slightly, took his belongings from under the seat, and reluctantly got off the carriage. Gauda pushed open the garden gate. As soon as he entered, an apprentice cleaning the garden noticed him and immediately came forward to take the bags from his hands. Gauda didn't stand on ceremony and casually instructed, "Take the bread, vegetables, and meat to the kitchen. Take everything else to my workshop. Also, tell Ramos that there will be a snack for lunch, potato stew, okay?" Upon hearing the words potato stew, the apprentice subconsciously swallowed, his eyes shining, and excitedly replied. Actually, it wasn't just him who craved meat, Gauda was craving it too. Since arriving in this world, he hadn't eaten a single piece of meat. This was unimaginable for Gauda, a modern person. He had always been a carnivore. A meal without meat was like a meal without meat. Just thinking about it made Gauda's mouth water with the aroma of meat juices. In the end, Gauda's expectations weren't disappointed, but they weren't fully met either. He did eat meat, but the taste was far from satisfactory. Because in this world, unless one was wealthy, most ordinary families didn't have many seasonings, and their methods of preparing meat were extremely rudimentary. Blanch the meat chunks in boiling water, then add potatoes and peas, a little salt, and a slightly spicy herb called zinceo, to stew for about half an hour before serving. This potato stew wasn't bad, but it was far from the potato stew Gauda remembered. It relied solely on the flavor of the meat itself. However, the apprentices and even Gauda himself ate it with great relish. For them, who hadn't eaten meat in a long time, as long as it wasn't burnt or spoiled, it was delicious no matter what. I must live a life where I can eat meat at every meal. After a hearty meal, Gauda made a grand vow in his heart. Becoming the master of the herb garden brought another great benefit. Gauda's days were previously packed full. Mornings were filled with the daily work of the herb garden, including cultivating herbs and raising gray mice. Afternoons were for concocting potions, and evenings were for cultivation. But given his position in the herb garden, he naturally no longer needed to do those basic daily tasks. In other words, Gauda suddenly had an entire morning of free time. He had been recovering from injuries recently, and his mind, which had been tense for a month, had only just been released, so Gauda comfortably enjoyed his free time. But after this period, Gauda gradually began to feel restless. It was too boring. Mainly because there weren't many forms of entertainment in this world, and even if there were, Gauda couldn't afford them. On the other hand, he couldn't find much to fill his extra morning of free time. Limited by his mental and physical strength, he could only concoct one set of basic spider venom potions a day. Increasing the workload further would overload his mental energy, even affecting his evening cultivation. Cultivation time was fixed at 3 to 4 hours. Exceeding this time would lead to excessive mental energy depletion, resulting in a low-efficiency phase of diminishing returns. The importance of mental energy was vividly demonstrated. Therefore, upon arriving at the agreed-upon time with Pierre, Gauda left the herb garden early in the morning with 2 newly prepared sets of basic spider venom potions, rushing to the general store. General store. It's settled? The other party is willing to raise the price to 8 Sean gold coins. Gauda looked at Pierre's smug expression, still somewhat incredulous. This old man's bargaining skills were so impressive, almost doubling the repair fee? With such a silver tongue, why not go out and become a wealthy merchant, instead of staying here as a small shopkeeper? Would I lie to you? Pierre raised an eyebrow. But it's true that they were in a hurry, which is why they were able to raise the price so easily. Didn't I tell you the day before yesterday that the number of wild beasts and feline creatures outside the city has increased significantly recently, and they've become unusually aggressive? Some people in the city suspect that it might be due to some high-level magical plant about to mature, attracting the feline creatures. The old man's information was very detailed, and he explained to Goddard, so these people sent people to search deep in the mountains outside the city. But they've been searching for almost half a month and still haven't found anything. The client who asked you to repair the magical item is one of those who wanted to find the high-level magical plant. This magical item can help them find the high-level magical plant they're looking for, Goddard asked in return. Clever, Pierre praised, taking a simple ring from a drawer under the counter and handing it to Goddard. This is the magical item the client wants to repair. The ring was made of polished copper, with delicate rune patterns engraved on its surface, which emitted a faint glow under the light. Goddard examined it closely. Sure enough, one of the runes, originally a pale white pattern, was now covered with a thin layer of green rust. The once continuous pattern was corroded and broken, revealing a duller metallic texture beneath the ring. The ring must have suffered some kind of corrosive damage, which also destroyed the magical runes engraved on it. Its name is the Beast Language Ring, Pierre explained as Golda took the ring. It's imbued with the first circle spell, Animal Communication, which grants a temporary ability to communicate with animals, what humans can't find. Perhaps the only way is to ask animals. Golda understood his client's intentions. Exactly, Pierre nodded, adding, the client requires the Beast Language Ring to be repaired within 10 days. No problem. Golda put away the Beast Language Ring, confidently assuring him, I'll definitely get it done for you. Golda understood that the reason he could obtain the Beast Language Ring so easily, without any guarantees or even meeting the client, was entirely because Pierre had taken all the risks. You can run away, but you can't hide. Pierre's general store was right there. He couldn't just run away over a broken level 1 magic item, could he? That's why the client could entrust the Beast Language Ring to Pierre so confidently. And Pierre, in turn, entrusted the Beast Language Ring to him purely out of trust. This trust made Golda extremely grateful. After putting away the Beast Language Ring, Golda took out the 2 sets of basic spider venom potions he had brought this time. Pierre still bought them at 35 silver per set. With the newly acquired 70 silver, Golda went straight to the herbal medicine shop and spent 60 silver to buy 5 more 1-year supply green spider sacks. There was no other way. Green spider sacks were one of the 3 main ingredients for basic spider venom potions. Without them, it was impossible to concoct the basic spider venom potion. After reluctantly paying for the goods, Golda really wanted to buy a book on herbal cultivation or herb identification. But unfortunately, the herbal medicine shop simply wouldn't sell such things. While not as precious as a medicine prescription, it was still their livelihood, enough to be passed down for generations. Knowledge is extremely precious and expensive in this world. This made Golda even more eager to open the wooden box left by the Mage Seda. There was a high probability that the box contained the prescription for a basic stamina potion. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42, Animal Conversation. Returning to the herb garden with a damaged Beast Language Ring, Golda threw himself into his new work, repairing the ring, concocting potions, and practicing guidance and meditation. This was Golda's top priority. It was the 13th day of the spring sprout month. All 5 green spider sacks were used up again, yielding 5 sets of high-quality basic spider venom potions. This quantity was barely enough, so Golda immediately took the newly concocted 5 sets of basic spider venom potions to Phil's potion shop to make the sale. The 2 companies had been cooperating for many years, and their trading method was already established. Therefore, this transaction went smoothly without any hiccups. The only difference was that Golda immediately exchanged the receipt for payment. 10 gleaming Sean gold coins. It's worth noting that the price of green spider sacks, the main ingredient in basic spider venom potions, had increased by 20% due to the surge in sales. However, Phil's potion shop's purchase price for basic spider venom potions remained unchanged at 2 gold per set. However, these were all prices agreed upon beforehand. It was a favor if they were willing to raise the price, and it was normal if they didn't. With a hint of resentment, this time Gauda didn't bother with a more convenient option. He went straight to Phil's potion shop and spent a fortune, spending 9 gold coins to buy 15 green spider pouches, enough for half a month. He was afraid that if he kept doing this, the price of green spider pouches would rise further. Spring Sprout Month, the 16th day. It was also the 8th day since he received the beast language ring. Alright, looking at the beast language ring on the table, its green embroidery gone and its runes delicately complete, Gauda smiled with satisfaction. He concentrated his mental energy on the ring, making a final check. The next instant, information flowed from the ring into his mental consciousness. Wearing the ring will grant a slight awakening effect. 1 first circle spell, Animal Conversation, can be cast daily without cost. Animal Conversation, Prophecy, first circle, you can ask animals questions and receive answers, but this spell cannot make animals more friendly or cooperative. Moreover, cunning and alert animals might give vague and brief answers, and if an animal is not very intelligent, it might say something foolish. If an animal is friendly to you, it might help you or even be at your beck and call. The feedback from the information stream indicates that the magic of the beast language ring has been restored, meaning that Gauda has successfully repaired a damaged ring. He completed the task 2 days ahead of schedule. Actually, Gauda was somewhat curious about how the animal conversation spell, which described asking animals questions and receiving answers, actually worked. Animals couldn't possibly suddenly be able to speak, could they? The thought was a bit terrifying, and it seemed unlikely. Now that the beast language ring was repaired, Gauda temporarily ended his seclusion, tidied himself up a bit, and went out. When he returned to the commercial district, he clearly felt that the flow of people had increased significantly. Obviously, the increase in wild beasts and feline creatures outside the city was still having a positive impact on Hogan City. At least for now, it seemed to be a positive effect, contributing to Hogan City's economic prosperity to some extent. Gauda shook his head, dismissing these trivial matters, and headed straight for Pierre's general store. Not bad, you've managed to repair a level 1 magical item in less than 10 days. The old man was always shrewd. Seeing that Gauda hadn't visited for 8 days but arrived today, he guessed that the beast language ring must be repaired. Take a look, Gauda chuckled and handed the beast language ring to Pierre. Pierre first took a sip of tea, then put down his cup and took the beast language ring. Gauda was somewhat envious. Even the cheapest tea cost 2 copper coins a pot, and judging from the color of the tea in the cup, it was clearly of decent quality, a good item. This old man was really rich. Pierre had finished inspecting the ring and nodded in satisfaction. He stroked the previously damaged and corroded areas of the beast language ring, clicking his tongue in admiration. Your craftsmanship is truly remarkable. You've repaired even this level of damage to such a perfect state. Gauda grinned. It was repaired with magic. How could it not be perfect? Putting away the beast language ring, Pierre reached into his pocket, pulled out a money pouch, counted out 8 gold coins, and pushed it to Gauda. Gauda was slightly taken aback. What's this? The client wouldn't pay the repair fee before seeing the beast language ring successfully repaired. That was the client, not a sucker. I'm closing my shop in a couple of days and heading to Bremen. I'll deliver the beast language ring to the client before I leave. I'm paying you in advance so you don't have to make another trip, Pierre explained. How long will it take? Gauda asked. It's nearly 200 kilometers from here to Bremen, a round trip that will take about 10 days. Add in the time for errands, and it'll probably take about half a month. Don't make a wasted trip during this time, Pierre advised. Because of the presence of mages who can use magic to participate in the nation's infrastructure development, the roads in the Duchy of Sienne are actually quite good. Furthermore, Pierre's well off and will definitely rent a horse for long journeys. Therefore, even though Pierre is quite old, he can complete the 400-kilometer journey in about 10 days. Go safely and return safely, Gauda said. Leaving the general store, Gauda, carrying a huge sum, thought for a moment and went to the Pien lamb market, spending 2 silver and 2 copper to buy 4 pounds of meat. An extra meal today. Time passed day by day, and Gauda's days were peaceful yet fulfilling, making medicine, selling medicine, and cultivating. And on the 3rd day after repairing the beast language ring, which was the 19th day of the spring bud month, Gauda, who had recently manifested a 6-petaled lotus, had made another small breakthrough in his meditation technique, successfully manifesting a 7th petal. This speed startled even Gauda himself. Meditation was inherently more difficult to cultivate than guidance magic, Yet while his guidance magic hadn't even broken through a single level, his meditation had already broken through 2. He was now just one step away from the 8-petaled lotus required for a second-class apprentice. Gada's magical power had long since met the requirements for a second-class apprentice, to unleash 5 spells in one go. It was just that his predecessor's progress in meditation had held him back, keeping him at the first-class apprentice level. He was now diligently filling the gaps left by his predecessor. Of course, this wasn't unique to Gada. For 99% of mages, progress in guidance magic was generally faster than in meditation. This was because, besides the greater difficulty of meditation, items that could aid in meditation cultivation were extremely rare. Every 5 days, Gada would personally deliver 5 newly concocted batches of basic spider venom potions to Phil's potion shop, collecting 10 gold coins in return. As his finances improved, Gada began to supplement his diet more frequently in the herb garden. This was because he discovered his body was severely depleted and unusually weak due to malnutrition. Furthermore, he now had a lot of free time in the mornings. Therefore, Gada devised a strict physical training plan for himself, encompassing both aerobic and anaerobic exercise to improve his physique. Although, thanks to the wind spirit moon shadow, he was destined to rise to prominence and master powerful supernatural abilities in the future, Gada wouldn't look down on the improvements that training could bring. He deeply understood the principle that only what is obtained can truly be considered one's own. Those who have lofty ambitions often have fragile lives. The future could wait. Even if he could fly and teleport using magic in the future, that was still a distant prospect. Improving his physique through training was the most practical thing to do now. Being grounded was the key. Unrealistic ambitions were unacceptable. And as the saying goes, 3 parts training, 7 parts nutrition. The importance of nutrition was undeniable. He needed to supplement his protein intake. Moreover, he's at the prime of his growth spurt, the golden period for increasing height. How can he not eat meat? Gada doesn't want to become a level 3 disabled person. With a combination of exercise and extra meals, it's visibly that Gada's body is getting stronger every day. The price is that the previously budgeted minimum of 4 silver coins per day has risen to 5 silver coins per day. And Gada's appetite is getting better and better, and his demand for meat is also increasing. It's conceivable that the daily expenses of the herb garden will rise again soon. Chapter 43 Earth Veins. During this time, whenever Gada went out to sell medicine, he would take the opportunity to wander around Hogan City. Firstly, to familiarize himself with Hogan City, and secondly, to relax and experience the otherworld atmosphere. Thirdly, to learn about local customs, prices, and other aspects of life, deepening his understanding of this world. It was this activity that led him to notice a significant increase in people in the city who were clearly not locals. This made Gada wary. He had a strange feeling that a storm was brewing. Furthermore, he had an unexpected gain. In this world, books were a rare and expensive commodity. Only larger cities had libraries that sold books. In smaller cities, it was unthinkable. Only nobles, scholars, and wealthy merchants possessed private collections of books. This was due to the monopoly of knowledge by the powerful classes in this world. Having learned this, Gada had given up hope of buying any books in Hogan City. However, unexpectedly, while wandering around, he discovered a small workshop selling books in the commoners' district. The workshop owner was named Derich, a former monk from the Bremen monastery. Most monasteries have their own libraries for monks to study doctrine. They also copy and sell their collections of books to scholars and wealthy patrons. Derich was responsible for copying and producing books while at the monastery. Later, due to high maintenance costs and a depletion of funds, the monastery could no longer operate and had to close. The monks were then dismissed and sent home. When the monastery closed, the monks divided up the monastery's belongings, taking everything they could carry. Derich was already quite old and couldn't get anything good. He could only pack some books from the monastery's collection and return to his birthplace, Hogan. He was too old and physically weak to do any manual labor. Even though he could read, his age made it difficult to find workers. But people still need to eat. The old monk decided to rent a small house in the commoners' district and open a small workshop. He transcribed books in his workshop and sold them directly to clients, barely making ends meet in his old age. The books this old monk sold weren't particularly valuable, mainly religious texts. These included guides to religious rituals, handbooks of church doctrine, books of church history, and even church literature including hymns. In addition, There were a few heroic epics reflecting heroes and historical events, and a few scattered chronicles, travelogues, and books on geography and humanities. There were no books of general knowledge or practical manuals. Of course, even if Gada had them, he couldn't afford them. Here, any book involving knowledge was priced exorbitantly. Those traditionally considered miscellaneous books were much cheaper. However, this cheapness was only relative. Although the variety and quantity of books were small, they were exactly what Gada needed. He bought all 4 travelogues and books on geography and humanities, spending only 2 gold coins. This price was astonishing. In his previous life, it wasn't uncommon to get a pound of books for 50 gold coins with a bargain. Despite the pain in his eyes, Gada obediently paid the money, adhering to the principle of when in Rome, do as the Romans do, returning to the herb garden with the 4 expensive books. Gada eagerly picked up a copy of the Geography of Bremen to begin learning about this world. He had to thank Master Seda for this. If he hadn't been taken back to the herb garden and made an apprentice, Gada, a former beggar, would never have learned to read. After flipping through a few pages, Gada's face showed utter surprise. This is completely different from what I imagined. The entire Bremen region, located in the western part of the Duchy of Sienne, was far more vast than Gada had imagined. Because the overall landscape of this world was so similar to medieval Europe, and because Hagen City was indeed small, with extremely low productivity in his view, Gada had subconsciously considered the Duchy of Sienne to be a small country of tens of thousands, at most 100,000 square kilometers. The fact that Bremen, the largest city known to the people of Hagen City, was actually less than 200 kilometers away from Hagen City further confirmed his assumption. The result was that the Bremen region alone was actually much larger than the Duchy of Sienne had imagined. The entire Bremen region stretched over 400 kilometers east to west and 800 kilometers north to south, with a total area of over 300,000 square kilometers. That's the size of Guangdong and Fujian provinces combined. Furthermore, the Bremen region has 9 major rivers and 7 prominent mountain ranges. Forests, swamps, and lakes are scattered throughout. And this is only a western region of the Duchy of Sienne. One can only imagine how vast the Duchy of Sienne must be. Such a vast territory, with the technological level of this world, is it possible to manage it all? Won't it be overwhelming? This question instinctively popped into Gada's mind, and he muttered, "This doesn't make sense." The next moment, he smiled sheepishly, realizing he had subconsciously been thinking with fixed ideas again. Although this world's technological level was not high, equivalent to medieval Europe, it possessed extraordinary powers like magic. Isn't the reason extraordinary powers are called extraordinary precisely because of their unscientific nature? Shaking his head, Gada turned the page and continued reading. Despite its vast size, the Bremen region is actually quite desolate. Centered on Bremen, a ring of 8 smaller cities, including Hagen, forms a developed area of nearly 10,000 square kilometers. The remaining 300,000 square kilometers are undeveloped wilderness, teeming with ferocious beasts and dangerous feline creatures. Further down, Gada finally gleaned some information about feline creatures. Although he frequently heard the term and often used it, Gada didn't actually know much about them. Finding information about them was like finding a treasure. After the plains converged, felines frequently formed, their numbers increasing daily, and feline creatures emerged. However, the Bremen region hadn't seen any new felines form for 200 years. King Jairus Zai once praised Bremen as a blessed land. The text only contained this brief description of feline creatures before moving on to other geographical descriptions. However, even this short sentence contained a wealth of information. Planetary convergence. Does this mean there's more than one plane in this world? Or is the plane here different from the planes I know? The phrase frequent ley lines, ley line creatures emerging is easy to understand. Ley line creatures come from ley lines, and ley lines are constantly being generated, their numbers continuously increasing. The number of ley line creatures should be the same. Indeed, a world with extraordinary power is incredibly complex and strange, containing countless secrets. The statement that no new ley lines have appeared in the Bremen region for a century did indeed reassure Gada slightly. He had already witnessed the terrifying power of ley line creatures once in the herb garden. It's obvious that the appearance of ley lines is a natural disaster for humanity. Once a natural disaster occurs, there are too many uncontrollable factors. How could a weak first-class mage apprentice like him remain unaffected? Gada didn't want his current peaceful life to be disrupted. He was still young, his strength insufficient, yet his potential boundless. I'll just quietly develop and wait until I'm much stronger before making any moves. Chapter 44 Return. Half a month is half a month indeed. After the last day of spring sprout month, the green leaf month began, and the city began to flourish with greenery. Gouda delivered 5 sets of basic spider venom potions to Phil's potion shop and purchased enough green spider bags for half a month's use from Phil's potion shop. After doing all this, he stopped by Pierre's general store and was surprised to find that the shop, which had been closed for half a month, was now open. The familiar little old man was leisurely reclining in a deck chair, basking in the warm morning sun, looking quite content. Gouda's face lit up with joy as he approached. "You little rascal, you haven't been watching my shop every day, have you? I just got back yesterday, and I've only been open for half an hour today, and I haven't had a single customer yet, and you're here." Pierre also noticed Gouda's arrival, shifted his body, and stood up somewhat reluctantly, greeting him. Just a coincidence. Gouda's mind was filled with spell scrolls and the anxious feeling of possibly getting rich soon. "Alright, I know what you're thinking." Pierre, being a shrewd man, wouldn't keep anyone in suspense at a time like this. "Wait a moment." He moved the recliner aside and went into the shop's warehouse, emerging a moment later. Seeing Pierre emerge, Gouda's eyes lit up. In the old man's hand was a scroll. "I told you you're lucky, kid. The striking spell has a very low usage rate. The Emerald Alliance's scroll makers only made 3 striking spell scrolls last year. Of the 3 scrolls, 1 was put on the shelves for sale, 1 was used internally by the organization's mages, and this one was left over, which I managed to get my hands on," Pierre boasted as he handed the scroll to Gouda. "Check it out." Gouda took the spell scroll as if it were a priceless treasure, examining it closely. The scroll felt extremely strong and dense, with fine fibrous textures, giving it a natural, classic beauty. It was likely made of finely processed animal hide. The parchment must have been specially treated to ensure the long-term preservation of magical power. Runes and magical symbols were drawn in dark ink along the edges of the scroll. These patterns were not merely decorative, they contained the key to unlocking magical power. The scroll itself was tightly rolled up, tied at both ends with a slipknot, which could be easily pulled open. "It can be untied, it won't activate the spells inside, don't worry," Pierre interjected, noticing Gouda's hesitation. Reassured, Gouda immediately untied the slipknot and opened the scroll. Before him were incantations written in a strange script. These characters seemed to possess a life of their own, occasionally flashing with a faint light, revealing the magic within. Gouda didn't recognize the script, as it was magical writing. Only someone with the ability to read magic or a thorough understanding of this type of script could decipher it. However, this didn't prevent him from using the spell scroll. Using a spell scroll simply requires opening the scroll, concentrating on the incantation on it, and silently reciting a specific intention to release the sealed magical power within. Of course, before use, the user must first identify the spell and its level on the scroll. Furthermore, the user's mental strength must reach a corresponding level, otherwise, they cannot control and activate the spell within the scroll. The spell scroll's mental strength requirement is 1 level lower than the spell's ring, with a minimum requirement of a mage apprentice. That is, a mage apprentice can use a level 1 spell scroll, a level 1 mage can use a level 2 spell scroll, and so on. After examining it for a while, Gouda retied the scroll, a smile appearing on his face. "You've really helped me a lot." "Just business," Pierre shrugged casually. "The scroll cost 7 gold, the meal I treated you to out of courtesy isn't yours." He extended his right hand, palm up, to Gouda. Gouda quickly rummaged through his pocket, counted out 7 Sean gold coins, and handed them to Pierre. Cash on delivery. After a period of hard work selling medicine, Gouda's savings had reached 21 gold, and he had just felt a bit more financially secure. But now, he was back to square one. "Only 14 gold left in my account, and in a few days I need to buy a batch of wormwood and snake-tooth grass seedlings to plant in the herb garden. Otherwise, at the current rate of consumption, by the end of the year, the output of these 2 herbs in the herb garden won't keep up with the consumption. If that happens, then all 3 main ingredients will have to be purchased from the pharmacy, and the cost of medicine will rise from the current 20-25 silver to 30 silver. The profit per potion will be 10 silver less, which is far too meager. These herb seedlings are a must-buy, and there's no time to delay, but buying seedlings is an expense, and then there's the fertilizer needed to cultivate them, another expense, After calculating all this, Gauda once again uttered a sigh that's universal in any world. Living is hard. I can only pray that Master Sada's legacy won't disappoint me. Although Gauda was somewhat confident that it would be a huge explosion. What if? What if Master Sada was a cunning old fox, pulling some kind of anti-hero trick? It wasn't entirely impossible that the seemingly heavily protected box was actually empty, with the truly valuable items displayed in the most conspicuous place. If that happened, besides cursing old Deng a few times, there didn't seem to be much he could do. He couldn't exactly dig up the corpse and whip it to vent his anger, could he? The recent strange occurrences outside the city might not be as simple as they seem. Seeing Gauda put away the spell scroll and prepare to leave, Pierre hesitated for a moment, but finally stopped him, kindly reminding him, "You should stock up on some food in the future, so you won't be caught unprepared if something bad really happens." Gauda was startled and quickly and humbly asked, "What do you mean by something bad?" Knowing Pierre as he did, he didn't think the old man would speak without reason or exaggerate. The fact that he was being given this advice meant he must have discovered something. It's hard to be sure right now, but the increased number of Leline creatures is definitely for a reason. I initially thought it might be due to the maturation of some high-level magical plant causing the Leline creatures to gather. However, this has been going on for too long. Pierre's expression grew serious. With so much time, those magical plants should have matured long ago. I can't be sure what's going on right now. I need to observe the situation further. My intuition tells me that something bad has probably happened, but I don't know if it will affect us. Pierre sighed and revealed a little more. This time I went to Bremen to prepare an escape route. If things go badly, I'll probably have to flee to Bremen. Hopefully, things won't get that bad. After all, people can run away, but my shop can't. He's getting on in years. If he really abandoned the shop, he probably wouldn't be able to find a new livelihood in Bremen and would have to live off his savings. This was the choice he would make in the worst-case scenario. So, if you can, try to make some preparations as well, Pierre said, leaving the rest at that. I understand. Thank you for reminding me. Gauda nodded seriously, his mood unconsciously becoming a little heavier. Chapter 45 Unboxing. On the way back to the herb garden, Gauda initially maintained a normal pace, only occasionally touching his chest to confirm that the spell scroll he had placed there was still intact. As he drew closer to the garden, Gauda could no longer contain his eagerness, and his pace quickened. Upon entering the garden, he jogged a few steps and rushed into his workshop. Gauda bent down and dragged out a large wooden box from under his workbench, then retrieved the spell box he had carefully placed inside. Next, he took out the extremely precious spell scroll from his robes, the scroll containing the spell strike. After a moment's thought, the impatient Gauda forced himself to calm down. He didn't immediately use the spell scroll, but instead went to the restroom to wash his hands. Better safe than sorry. What he was about to do was essentially opening a blind box, and a paid one at that. This spell scroll cost a fortune. If it didn't yield anything good, it would be a complete loss. Therefore, a proper ritual was necessary before opening it. In a world full of mysticism, believing in it isn't shameful. After washing his hands and returning to his workshop, Gauda finally picked up the spell scroll. He simply pulled the nut on it, and the scroll opened, lying flat in his hand. Gauda took a deep breath, concentrating his mind on the scroll. In an instant, the obscure magical characters on the scroll glowed faintly, resonating with Gauda's spirit. Sensing that powerful force, Gauda's mind stirred, sending a driving thought towards the wooden spell box on the table. Under Gauda's control, the light on the spell scroll suddenly burst forth, emanating a magical fluctuation invisible to the naked eye but clearly perceptible to spiritual power. The magical fluctuation seemed to come alive, instantly transforming into a bolt of lightning that shot out according to Gauda's will, heading straight for the spell box on the table. The fluctuation pierced through the air, striking the invisible arcane lock on the box. The moment they collided, a ripple, like waves on water, spread across the box's surface. Like a pebble breaking the surface of water, it created a series of tiny, dense cracks. Cracks appeared and disappeared, each accompanied by a soft sound. With a final crack, the ripples vanished, signifying that the magical power on the box had been temporarily suppressed. The spell scroll in Gauda's hand, after its magical power dissipated, also turned into specks of light and vanished into the air. Scrolls disappear after use, this is common knowledge. Should I open it now? Gauda thought to himself, looking at the box, which seemed no different from before. He knew he needed to open it quickly and retrieve its contents. Pierre had told him that the striking technique couldn't break the arcane lock, it could only temporarily suppress its magical effects. Once the time was up, the arcane lock would reactivate. Although he knew time was of the essence, God didn't act rashly. Instead, he took a few steps back until he reached the doorway and opened it, so he could escape if anything went wrong. Then, a barely perceptible glimmer of light gathered at God's fingertips. A semi-transparent, floating ghostly hand appeared. Under his control, the ghostly hand reached forward, gently and precisely touching the wooden box from a distance, the mage's hand. May the King of Yellow and Black, who holds good fortune, bless me. God silently prayed, then gently pushed with the mage's hand. A creak. With a slight scraping sound, the wooden box, which had previously defied all his strength, was easily opened. God glanced at it from afar and could see that although the box wasn't large, it contained quite a lot of things. It wasn't an empty box. A flicker of surprise crossed God's eyes. He dared not delay, fearing the arcane lock would reactivate, and quickly manipulated his mage hand to remove everything from the box. As the items were taken out, God's eyes grew brighter. First were 3 thicker books. Then 5 much thinner booklets. Below that were 3 old parchment sheets. Next was a small stack of about 20 pages, increasingly older, the bottom pages yellowed, clearly showing signs of age. Further on was a scroll tied with rope, its appearance somewhat resembling a spell scroll. And the last thing he took out made God's breath quicken. Gleaming gold, radiating an alluring charm, round and smooth, with a spirited little rooster engraved on its surface. Shone gold coins. The mage placed the gold coins at the very bottom of the wooden box. A full 50 shone gold coins. Having never seen or possessed so much money before, God couldn't contain his excitement. Praise be to the King of Yellow and Black, God could feel his heart pounding. This was a windfall. This was the reward he deserved for taking such a huge risk to kill a senior third-tier mage apprentice. The contents of the wooden box had now been completely removed. After confirming there were no hidden dangers, God quickly closed the door and eagerly went to the wooden table, grabbing the 50 gold coins and playing with them. The coins clinked in his hands, producing a delightful sound. The cold, metallic texture was irresistible to Gouda. Not long ago, he had been feeling the pinch of spending money on an extra meal. He had even considered splitting a single copper coin in half, but the thought of its value decreasing after being split had stopped him. Now, seeing so many gold coins, he felt a sense of unreality. So much money, how am I going to spend it? After playing with the 50 gold coins left by the mage Seda, God's gaze shifted to the still open spell box beside him. He knew that in a little while, the arcane lock on the box would reactivate. At that time, the box would be locked again and could not be opened. God thought for a moment, then an idea struck him. He rummaged around on the table, gathered a small stack of scrap paper, and put it inside, filling the box again before closing it. At that moment, a faint ripple of light appeared. The arcane lock reactivated at just the right moment. God looked at the closed box and smiled knowingly. The student had surpassed the master. The mage Seda didn't use unconventional tactics, but that didn't mean he wouldn't. After doing all this, God began to calmly examine the other spoils of war. Chapter 46 The 3 Principles of a Mage. First were the 2 books placed on top of the wooden box, the ones that had been taken out at the beginning. Their titles were clearly marked on the covers, Apprentice Guidance and Apprentice Meditation. God picked up the 2 books, glanced through them, and after confirming they matched his memory of the practice methods, put them down. It seemed Master Seda wasn't so cunning as to secretly hide a trick while teaching his apprentices. Of course, it was more likely that Master Seda had never taken these beggars seriously, and certainly wouldn't have imagined that any of them possessed a threat to him. The thinner book, however, ignited a fire within Gouda after reading its title, The Mage Apprentice Handbook, Introduction to Spells. This was an introductory book for mage apprentices. Seemingly insignificant, it was precisely what Gouda needed most right now. Master Seda had never treated his apprentices as true students, and therefore had never properly taught them mage knowledge. Despite having mastered 5 spells, Gouda's understanding of the mage world was no different from that of an ordinary person, a typical case of being completely ignorant. This is like learning English by marking pinyin. It looks plausible, but it doesn't build a solid knowledge system. The further you learn, the more difficult it becomes, and you'll inevitably fall behind. Thinking this, Gouda opened the book with great interest. A striking line on the title page caught his eye. The three principles of mages. This term wasn't unfamiliar to Gouda. Amy had told him one of the three principles, never let anyone know your spells. Previously, Gouda had only vaguely understood it. He knew the principle of know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated, but he didn't understand why spells were considered so important, even listed as one of the three principles of mages. However, after his battle with the mage Seda, Gouda finally understood this statement deeply. If he hadn't known that the mage Seda possessed the fire arrow spell, how would he have thought of the dust explosion as a deadly move? If he hadn't known beforehand that the mage Seda possessed the flash spell, he would have died on the spot from Seda's spell combo. Spells are the lifeblood of a mage. Therefore, Gouda was filled with curiosity about the complete three principles. His gaze moved downwards. 1. Knowledge is power. 2. Never let others know your spells. 3. Although spells are omnipotent, they are not omnipotent. The complete three principles left Gouda somewhat puzzled. He could understand the first principle, knowledge is power, to some extent. Although, from his current perspective, it should be called knowledge is money. Gouda had a deep understanding of the second principle, never let others know your spells. However, he thought that a more accurate term should be never let others know all your spells. Since mages possess extraordinary power, it's impossible for them not to cast spells. As long as they cast spells, others will inevitably know. Therefore, it's impossible to hide all one's spells, but it's true that one must never expose all one's spells. To achieve this, one must approach it from two aspects, either be sufficiently cautious, or have a sufficiently rich reserve of spells in one's own spellbook. The third point, while magic is omnipotent, it is not omnipotent, was somewhat difficult for Gouda to understand. It seemed similar to his previous life's classic saying, money isn't everything, but upon closer examination, the meaning seemed completely different. After pondering for a while without understanding, Gouda firmly memorized these three principles and stopped thinking about them, turning to the next page of the book. What is magic? The title was striking. A spell is an independent magical effect. It is a process of reshaping the magical power permeating the world and manifesting it in a specific way in a specific area. Spells can serve as a convenient tool, a necessity for survival, a weapon, or a protective barrier. They can create or heal damage, generate or eliminate specific states, absorb or bestow life force, and create or destroy everything. Spells are omnipotent. This should be considered the book's general outline. Gouda's mind was stirred by this rigorous academic yet seemingly boundless introduction. Can magic truly be omnipotent? Who knows? A mage apprentice certainly can't. Gouda, well aware of his limitations, continued reading. Spell rings. Each spell belongs to one of the rings from 0 to 9. Although a 9th ring spell has never appeared before, the spell ring roughly indicates its strength and complexity, but low ring spells are still incredibly powerful, such as the 1st ring spell, Magic Missile. Even among 0th ring spells, which are often not recognized by high-level mages, there are classic spells like Mage Hand. Interestingly, these high-level mages who don't recognize 0th ring spells as spells almost inseparable from them in their daily lives. The division of spell rings was common knowledge to Gouda, but there were details he didn't know. A 9th ring spell has never appeared before. Based on the correspondence between mage level and spell ring, does that mean there are number 9th ring mages in this world, and the most powerful are 8th ring mages? Gouda's mind wandered, and he couldn't help but think about it. He could think about it, but he couldn't dwell on it. Beings like 8th ring mages and 9th ring mages, the pinnacle of the world, were not something a first-class mage apprentice like him should waste his time thinking about. Spell rules. When anyone casts a spell, they must follow the same set of rules. Casting time, casting range, and spell duration. Casting time is the time required for the mage to activate the spell's model. Generally, the higher the spell's rank, the more complex and massive the spell model, and the longer it takes to activate, thus increasing the casting time. However, this isn't absolute. Some spells, even those with lower rank, may require several minutes or even hours to cast. Some mages possess special talents that allow them to cast spells in a very short time, even instantaneously. Casting range. The target of the spell must be within the spell's casting range. For example, a spell like Magic Missile targets a living being, while a spell like Fireball targets a point in space. Some spells only affect the caster. The casting range of these spells is themselves. However, once a spell is cast, Its effect is no longer limited by casting range, except for certain specific spells. Spell duration refers to the length of time a spell is in effect. The duration of different spells varies greatly, and can be measured in seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, or even years. Some spells even last until the spell is destroyed. Many spells are fleeting. These spells instantly harm, heal, create, or alter a creature or object in some way. Because their duration is only a moment, their consequences cannot be undone afterward. Chapter 47 New Spells. Gata was engrossed in reading, and the workspace was quiet except for the occasional rustling sound of him turning the pages. Spell schools. The effects of spells are ever-changing. Based on the effects of spells and the way mages manipulate magic, numerous spells are divided into different categories, namely spell schools. Spell schools are artificial classifications, serving only as supplementary descriptions of spells and do not inherently contain any rules. There are 8 spell schools in total. Protection School. The essence of protective spells is defense, but some also have offensive uses. Protection spells can create barriers, negate harmful effects, harm intruders, or drive creatures to other areas. Conjuration School. Conjuration spells involve teleporting creatures or objects from one place to another. Some spells summon creatures or objects to the caster's side, some teleport the caster to another location, and some can even create objects or effects out of thin air. Prophecy School. Prophecy spells reveal information. Its forms can be lost secrets, visions of the future, the location of treasures, the truth behind illusions, or strange phenomena of distant figures or regions. The breadth of information is too vast to summarize. Enchanting School. Enchanting spells can influence the mind of others, altering or controlling their behavior. These spells may cause enemies to see the spellcaster as a friend, force creatures to perform certain actions, or even manipulate other creatures like puppets. Evocation School. Evocation spells shape magical power into desired effects. Some evoke lightning or fire, while others channel energy to heal wounds. In short, of all schools of spells, evoked spells are the most destructive. Illusion School. Illusion spells can deceive the senses and even the mind of others. They can make people see things that don't exist, or not see things that do exist. They can also cause auditory hallucinations or memories of things that didn't actually happen. Some illusions are visible to anyone, while the most bizarre types can even be implanted directly into a creature's mind. Necromancy School. Necromancy spells manipulate the energies of life and death. Necromantic spells can grant creatures additional life force or draw life energy from others, which can create undead creatures, or even alternative forms of resurrection. Note, the practice of creating undead creatures using necromantic spells, such as manipulating corpses, is strictly prohibited. Goddard noticed this line of text, heavily circled by the Mage Seda. Transmutation School. Transmutation spells alter the properties of creatures, objects, or the environment. They can turn enemies into harmless creatures, enhance the power of allies, bring objects to life and obey the mage's commands, or enhance a creature's innate healing abilities, allowing its injuries to recover rapidly. Although spells are divided into 8 major schools, mages do not belong to any particular school. A mage should normally have a grasp of spells from all 8 major schools. It's unwise, even foolish, for a mage to specialize in only one school. Closing the apprentice's handbook, Goddard let out a long breath, feeling immensely enlightened. His understanding of magic was indeed far too limited, almost entirely unsystematic. This introductory book, titled The Mage Apprentice's Handbook, was invaluable to him at this moment. A mature mage, a mage who has mastered the magic of the 8 major schools, can indeed be considered omnipotent to a certain extent, Goddard exclaimed, finally understanding why the book began with such an audacious statement as magic. Omnipotent. It was simply because magic encompassed such a comprehensive range of fields. Before this, his understanding of magic was more inclined towards it being a powerful force. Now it seemed that it was, but not entirely. Power was only one aspect of magic. This also explained one of Goda's questions. In such a mystical world, why is magic the only extraordinary power? Because magic can do everything that other extraordinary powers can do. And what magic can do, other extraordinary powers may not be able to do. 2 transformation spells, 2 conjuration spells, and 1 defensive spell. Goddard reviewed his spell repertoire, increasingly feeling its scarcity. He hadn't even collected half of the 8 major schools of magic. Fortunately, I can expand my spell repertoire now. Goddard picked up 5 thin booklets filled with numerous characters beneath his apprentice's manual. Indeed, These booklets were the spell recipes left behind by the Mage Seda. Filled with excitement and anticipation, Gata carefully perused the 5 spell recipes left by the Mage Seda, tracking mark transmutation, 0 ring, upon contact with any exposed part of a creature's body, leaving an indelible mark without resistance. As long as the mark exists, the creature's whereabouts will be detected, but the range cannot exceed 50 miles, otherwise it will become ineffective. The mark can be scraped off with a sharp blade. The mark will disappear after the caster dies. Flash of light, evocation, 0th ring, creates a burst of light that dazzles creatures within 10 meters. Creatures with outside or already dazzled are unaffected by flash of light. Touch of fatigue, necromancer, 0th ring, upon contact with a target, you can inflict fatigue. You must successfully attack the target with a contact attack. The target will immediately become fatigued for the duration of the spell. This fatigue differs from ordinary fatigue. The effect disappears after the spell's duration ends. This spell is ineffective against creatures already fatigued. Normally, this spell lasts for 6 seconds, but its duration is affected by the target's physical constitution and even mental strength. Detect magic, prophecy, 0th ring. You can detect the aura of spells and spell items within 20 meters, determine the presence of magical aura, and perceive its quantity and intensity. A magical aura will leave a residual aura after its source is destroyed, if the source is a spell item, or dissipates, if the source is a spell. If you use detect spells to observe and direct these locations, the spell will mark the location as having a faint aura. The duration of the aura's dimness depends on the power of its source. The amount of information you gain depends on when you cast the spell. Detect spells have a range of 20 meters, and the object must be within your line of sight. Fire arrow, evocation, 0th ring. You throw a bolt of fire at a creature or object within 120 feet, 40 meters, performing a ranged spell attack on the target. If it hits, the target takes fire damage. Flammable objects hit by the spell will ignite. Chapter 48 Spirit Potion. The 5 spell recipes didn't include healing or to Mage's hand. Nor did they contain the strange spell that had caused him such agony when Theta questioned him. Clearly, these scrolls didn't include all the spells Theta possessed. This is understandable, though. Mages learn spells through more than just recipes. Besides, even if a mage learned a spell through a recipe, they might not keep it after successfully creating the spell model. Normally, once a spell is mastered, the recipe loses its value, unless you intend to resell it. While the 5 recipes weren't complete, they were all familiar to Geode. Tracking mark was obvious. Touch of fatigue was clearly the melee spell Theta possessed that Amy had mentioned. Flash of light and fire arrow were spells Geode had personally tested when confronting Theta. As for the detection magic, Gata had seen Pierre use it before. All 5 spells were practical and powerful. With 5 new spell recipes before him, any mage apprentice would be faced with a happy dilemma: which spells to learn first? After all, for a mage apprentice, mastering a single spell takes anywhere from 6 months to a year. Therefore, a priority must be established. Human energy and time are ultimately limited. Like studying, ordinary students usually choose 1 or 2 high-efficiency subjects for focused improvement in tutoring classes. Of course, this is the thinking of ordinary students. For a top student, there's only one phrase: I want them all. Top students have no weaknesses. Gata has always played this role of a top student since childhood. And fortunately, even in a different world, in the realm of magic, Gata can still continue his top student role. He wants them all. The order in which he learns spells is unimportant to him. He can simply pull out a spell recipe and begin constructing spell models. Anyway, it was just a matter of a few days sooner or later. Satisfied, Gata temporarily put down the 5 spell recipes and picked up the 3 old parchment sheets, flipping through them. Unsurprisingly, they were the potion recipes he had been longing for. He first pulled out one: basic spider venom potion. Tier 0 potion, has a strong paralyzing effect, not lethal. Main ingredients: 1 snake tooth grass, 1 stalk of wormwood, 1 portion of green spider sac. Gata was very familiar with the basic spider venom potion. He glanced at it briefly and put it aside, not looking at it closely. The second recipe Gata picked up was the basic endurance potion recipe, which interested him most. Basic endurance potion, Tier 0 potion, significantly enhances the drinker's physical strength and stamina, with no obvious side effects. Main ingredients: 1 section of high-altitude ironwood root, 1 kernel of a blazing sun fruit, 1 portion of wolf gland fluid. Auxiliary ingredients. Preparation steps. Dry the fresh blazing sun fruit naturally in the midday sun for 3 days, then crush it, keeping the kernel for later use. Peel and slice the high-altitude ironwood root. Enchant the 3 main ingredients. The high-altitude ironwood root for its drought-resistant and cold-resistant medicinal properties, and the blazing sun fruit for its fierce medicinal properties. Place the enchanted blazing sun fruit kernel in a mortar, add an appropriate amount of spring water, and grind clockwise. During the grinding process, add wolf gland fluid as needed to neutralize its fierce medicinal properties. But ensure that the fierce potion concentration does not fall below a certain level. Grind until the mixture turns a pale golden color. The recipe is so detailed that it describes every step and every detail of potion preparation. As long as one has a certain understanding and talent for potion preparation, one can master the preparation of basic stamina potions by using this recipe and experimentation. God's joy was evident. Phil's potion shop was offering 2 gold and 5 silver for a set of basic stamina potions, more valuable than basic spider venom potions. He had to master this recipe. God thought to himself, picking up the 3rd parchment. Compared to the previous 2 potion recipes, this parchment was much more worn, with frayed edges and a deeper yellow hue. God had a vague idea. Perhaps this was the potion that the apothecary Seda had been trying to concoct for the past 10 years? As he pondered this, God's gaze naturally fell on the parchment. The first line of text that caught his eye made his heart leap. Spirit potion, Tier 1 potion. Tier 1 potion. This was a Tier 1 potion. Just 2 Tier 0 potion recipes were enough to support an entire apothecary. If he could concoct a Tier 1 potion, he should have a foothold even in Bremen. Lost in thought, God continued reading. Spirit potion, Tier 1 potion, temporarily enhances the drinker's mental strength, mental perception, and mental control, but will cause mild mental fatigue afterward. Drinking this potion before constructing a spell model will increase the success rate of spell model construction. God realized his heart had jumped prematurely. Now it should have been a real joy. Increase the success rate of spell model construction. Don't be fooled by how easily he constructs spell models, as if solving a math problem, that's an exception. For the vast majority of mages in this world, constructing spell models is a headache-inducing and time-consuming task, yet it's incredibly important and indispensable. In this context, the market for a potion that can increase the success rate of spell model construction is self-evident. No wonder Old Deng has been obsessed with concocting this potion for 10 years. Besides his persistent personality, the temptation is simply too great. God now completely understands the mage Seda's obsession. Let's continue reading. Main ingredients: half an ounce of spirit bone powder, approximately 14 grams, 1 pair of illusionary butterfly wings. Auxiliary ingredients: 1 portion of silver thread grass, XXXXXX, XXXXXX, XXXXXX. Preparation steps: dry the colorful illusionary butterfly wings under moonlight and grind them into powder, keeping them for later use. Enchant the 2 main ingredients with the spirit bone powder, extracting the hallucinatory properties of the illusionary butterfly wings and the spiritual properties of the spirit bone powder. Enchant the 4 auxiliary ingredients, extracting the guiding and spiritual enhancing properties of the silver thread grass and the neutralizing and regulating properties of XXXXXX. Place the illusionary butterfly wing powder and spirit bone powder together in a mortar. The prescription is still very detailed, but 3 of the 4 auxiliary ingredients have been inexplicably erased. This is evident in every instance where these 3 auxiliary ingredients appear in the preparation steps. They have all been erased without exception. Clearly, someone deliberately did this. Above the 2 removed ingredients, Master Seda added 2 more medicinal names, Mandela bark and dried nettle. Only the last removed ingredient was listed as sage, followed by a question mark, presumably indicating uncertainty. 10 years of persistent experimentation hadn't been without results for Master Seda. Although Gowder wasn't entirely convinced of these results. After all, his predecessor had been poisoned by something similar from Master Seda. Gowder shook his head. Although he knew the value of the spirit potion, he wisely put down the prescription. He certainly wouldn't undertake such a laborious and wasteful endeavor as trying to complete the spirit potion's recipe, at least not in the short term. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Ring Up Potions. What are these pages? Gata pondered, picking up a small stack of yellowed pages beneath the potion recipes. His excitement was heightened by the immense haul. Spell recipes and potion formulas were all here. He couldn't imagine what other pages would warrant such careful placement in the arcanely locked wooden box by the Mage Seda. Gata casually flipped through a few pages, glancing at them briefly, and was immediately taken aback. It was a stack of letters. Most were from Bremen. One letter bore Seda's handwriting. It must have been a letter he had written, intended for a future destination, but which had been cut short by Gata's death. In Gata's mind, Seda was an orphan, reclusive, an evil mage. Precisely because of this, he had dared to take over the herb garden. How could such a person have so many correspondences? To whom were they addressed? A sense of unease crept into his heart. Could it be that Master Seda has some other mage friends? If so, perhaps this person noticed that Master Seda had suddenly stopped corresponding and, finding it strange, came looking for him. He wasn't confident he could kill another senior mage apprentice. Gata felt a little uneasy, but his curiosity was piqued, and he quickly and carefully read through the small stack of letters. After reading them, Gata first breathed a sigh of relief. These weren't letters to friends, they should be called family letters. So you're not all alone after all, Gata couldn't help but remark. This small stack of letters was all from Master Seda's wife, who lived far away in Bremen. Master Seda's wife had been sending him a letter every 6 months or so for 10 years, a total of 20 letters. From the contents of these 20 letters, Gata roughly pieced together Master Seda's past. It turned out that Master Seda was born into a mage family in Bremen, making him a second-generation mage. His family had once been prosperous. At its peak, the family boasted 1 second circle mage and nearly 10 first circle mages, making it a considerable magical force in Bremen. However, after several generations, the family began to decline, and in the last 4 generations, no first circle mage emerged, leading to its gradual decline. By the time of Mage Seda, he was the only male heir left in the once great family. His magical talent was also rather mediocre. Relying on the family's wealth and consuming numerous magic potions, he only barely reached the third-class apprentice level at the age of 35, with virtually no hope of becoming a first circle mage. Mage Seda had resigned himself to his fate. Although he lacked talent and cultivation, he unexpectedly achieved some success in potion making, successfully mastering the potion formulas acquired during the family's heyday. While his livelihood wasn't as prosperous as during the family's heyday, it was still decent enough, at least providing for him in Bremen. However, for some reason, a rumor inexplicably began to circulate in a small circle, claiming that Master Seda's ancestors had passed down several precious and extraordinary items. A common man is innocent, but possessing a treasure is a crime. Master Seda noticed some mysterious spying on him near his home and also heard the rumor. Although his aptitude was not great, he was shrewd enough to have lived to this age and keenly sensed that there must be a hidden hand behind this. Left with no other choice, Master Seda had to risk attempting ring ascension without any certainty or preparation. What is ring ascension? It's the process of a mage apprentice advancing to the first ring of a mage. A more common translation is foundation building. Only by advancing to the first ring of a mage could he possibly scare away these ill intentions spying on him and deter the hidden hand behind the scenes. The result, unsurprisingly, was a failure. Master Seda was also severely weakened by the failure. His lifespan was drastically reduced, and he showed signs of premature aging. Those who had been spying on him were already eager to act, and his failed promotion and extreme weakness only emboldened those villains who secretly coveted his family's wealth. Master Seda understood this. Left with no other choice, he explained everything to his wife, then fled his homeland, disappearing without a trace and quietly settling in Hagen. However, to avoid being discovered and to conceal his whereabouts, Master Seda had to leave his wife and children in Bremen, fleeing alone. Furthermore, to ensure he remained untraceable, Master Seda did not contact his wife for 3 whole years. Only after 3 years, when he expected the hidden forces to have lost patience and assumed he had abandoned his wife and children with his fortune, and would no longer pay much attention to his wife, did Master Seda reconnect with her in the way they had agreed upon before their separation. Forced into seclusion in Hagen, separated from his wife and children, Master Seda was filled with resentment. Not to mention, his failed attempt to advance to the first ring mage level had also led to a decline in his lifespan and a rapid decrease in his vitality. To reunite with his family, return to Bremen openly and legitimately, and to prolong his life and avoid premature death, Mage Seda must attempt ring advancement again, aiming to become a first-ring mage. But how difficult is it for a mage of Seda's mediocre talent to advance to the first-ring level? Especially since he had already failed once, damaging his very essence, advancing to the first ring would be even more difficult. Unless he consumed a ring ascension potion, there might be a sliver of hope. What is a ring ascension potion? If ring advancement is equivalent to foundation building, then a ring ascension potion is essentially equivalent to a foundation building pill. The problem is, the ring ascension potion is just as precious as a foundation building pill. The commonly used ring ascension potion in the Duchy of Siena is called Spirit Ascending Water, and because one of its main ingredients is extremely rare, the entire country produces very little Spirit Ascending Water each year. The annual production of spirit water undergoes internal processing before a small amount reaches the market, making it inaccessible to the Mage Seda. Fortunately, his ancestors left behind a fragmented recipe for a spirit potion. This was said to be an ancient potion from the ancient Misr dynasty. This gave Seda hope. If he could complete the spirit potion recipe and successfully concoct the potion, he could exchange it for spirit water. Even the rarest and most precious spirit water couldn't compare to Tier 1 potion recipe. After drinking the spirit water, he could attempt to advance through the rings. If he succeeded in becoming a Tier 1 mage, his lifespan problem would be solved. And he could legitimately return to Bremen and reunite with his family. Driven by this thought, Seda relentlessly devoted himself to completing the spirit potion recipe, almost to the point of madness. Since reconnecting with his wife, every year, Master Seda would entrust a caravan to deliver a letter to her in Bremen, informing her of his life over the past year. Although Master Seda still owned some properties in Bremen, which he couldn't take with him when he left, leaving them to his wife, she could earn enough from renting them out for their daily needs. However, as a husband and father, Master Seda always worried that his wife and children weren't eating or dressing well, so every year he would enclose 50 gold coins with his letter. This is the origin of the 50 Shan gold coins that got found in the wooden box. My dearest Missu, I know it hasn't been easy for you all these years, raising Cell alone. Your resilience and wisdom have always been my greatest pride. Please continue to manage the property according to our plan and arrange household expenses properly. As in previous years, I've arranged for 50 Shan gold coins to be sent with this letter, hoping it will be enough to support the family and slightly make up for my shortcomings. After years of seclusion, the concoction of the psychic potion is finally nearing completion. If all goes well, perhaps I can return home this year to reunite with you, back to your warm embrace, and we will never be separated again. When I left, Cell was only a month old and couldn't call me father yet. Now he's 13, a little adult. He must have inherited your beauty and my wisdom. Hearing in your letter that Cell's magical talent far surpasses mine makes me incredibly happy. After I return home, we'll send Cell to a magic academy. Everything will be alright. In these days of separation, though we cannot see each other, our hearts are tightly connected, like the two wisteria vines outside our window, their roots forever intertwined. Eternal love, Zelda. Chapter 50 Unknown Scroll. Putting down the letter that Master Seda had written long ago but never sent, and one that would never be sent, Gouda remained silent for a long time. To the apprentices in the herb garden, Master Seda was the absolute villain, a bad person, an abuser. But to Master Seda, he was just like Gouda, a victim struggling to reunite with his wife and children. And now, to Master Seda's wife and children, Gouda had become the villain. Realizing this, Gouda's emotions became incredibly complex. Even though he knew clearly that if he hadn't resisted then, he would be dead now. It was a situation where only one person could survive. Gouda's resistance was perfectly justified, and no one could find fault with it. But after reading Master Seda's letter, Gouda still felt a pang of pity for the woman who had waited for her husband's return in Bremen for over a decade, a woman he had never even met. This was something ingrained in his bones, something that wouldn't be easily erased by a single time travel. After a long silence, Gouda finally let out a long breath. It wasn't wrong of me to kill the Mage Seda, nor was it wrong of me to feel remorse. The two are not contradictory. He stopped dwelling on it. He decisively picked up the last item from the wooden box, a mysterious scroll resembling a spell scroll. The scroll was made of fine animal parchment, its edges luxuriously trimmed with a gold leaf. At each end of the scroll were two exquisite silver clasps, engraved with intricate patterns. A thin ribbon, a deep violet, was tied between the clasps, its flowing patterns meticulously embroidered in gold thread. Gata untied the ribbon, unfurled the scroll, and a faint fragrance wafted out. It was the scent of a preservative made from special herbs and magical materials, which kept the ink on the scroll as vibrant as ever despite the passage of time. However, Gata didn't recognize the writing on the scroll. It must be some kind of magical script, Gata concluded after a careful examination. In the lower right corner of these magical characters was an exquisite stamp. The stamp was circular, its main image being a bird with outstretched wings, perched atop an open book. The bird's feathers, the faintly visible magical symbols on the book's illustrations, every detail was lifelike, as if ready to leap out and become reality at any moment. Above the bird was a tiny diamond pattern. "I don't recognize it," Gwad said after examining it for a while, confirming that he didn't know the stamp's origin. Written in magical script, yet not a spell scroll, he had already checked it immediately. The magical script on the scroll didn't contain any magical power, it was just used as the most ordinary form of writing. The scroll itself is so exquisite, it must have been very expensive to make. Could it be some high-level potion recipe, God guessed? Or perhaps some kind of document? After all, it has a special stamp. After studying it carefully for a while, Gwad, finding nothing, finally stopped wasting his time. Thus, all the legacies left by the Mage Sata were accounted for: an apprentice's manual, 2 cultivation manuals, 5 spell recipes, 2 complete Tier 0 potion recipes, 1 incomplete Tier 1 potion recipe, 21 letters home, a scroll of unknown origin and purpose, and a full 50 Shan gold coins. The sheer abundance of his haul made Gauda almost want to do a somersault on the spot. After venting his excitement by pumping his fist, Gauda opened his cabinet and hid the 3 potion recipes inside. These were treasures. Unlike spell recipes which were difficult to sell, he could sell them directly for a large sum of money if necessary. The gold coins were best kept in a hidden compartment in his bedroom, so he could sleep peacefully at night. The apprentice's manual, cultivation methods, and 21 letters didn't need so much attention, so Gauda casually put them back in the wooden box. As for the scroll of unknown origin and purpose, Gauda thought for a moment and decided to give it a little more care, finally hiding it deep inside the cabinet as well. After dripping the last drop of green spider venom into the potion bottle in his hand, the constantly churning liquid gradually calmed down. A faint gray-green magical light flashed across the liquid. The potion was complete. 2 gold coins in hand, Gauda skillfully divided the newly concocted basic spider venom potion into smaller portions. Although he had just received a large sum of 50 gold coins, it didn't inflate his ego, preventing him from neglecting his daily practice of concocting a set of basic spider venom potions. One is a steady, long-term income, the other a windfall, a one-off deal. Gauda understood the difference. Windfalls don't come every day. If one treats windfall as regular income, or even deliberately pursues it while neglecting their original business, trouble will inevitably follow. Moreover, while 50 gold coins may seem like a lot, without continuous production, given the increasing expenses of the herb garden, this so-called huge sum would be squandered in just 6 months. From now on, you can eat as much meat as you want without any limits. Give your bodies a good boost. And you can switch from rye bread to wheat bread as your staple food, of course, only I can be so extravagant. After all, this is my personal income. Gauda wasn't worried that his hogging of the food would cause dissatisfaction among the other apprentices in the herb garden. In fact, he had always had this right, but Gauda couldn't get past his own conscience, which was why he had always eaten and drunk with the apprentices. However, now that we have more money, the other apprentices in the herb garden can also have their meals improved. They don't need to be so stingy as before. Add a meat meal every 2 days. 1 pound of meat is enough for 7 people. 1 pound of meat costs 7 copper coins, so it's only an extra 9 silver coins a month, which is acceptable. Gauda did the math in his mind and made his decision. In just 1 month, he had everyone eating meat every other day. Thinking about this, Gauda was quite pleased with himself. We can't forget Pierre's reminder. We need to stock up on food on the herb garden. If something really happens, whether we run away or keep it as backup, it's always good to be prepared. It's a common understanding that food prices always rise in the event of natural disasters or man-made calamities. Work is finished for the day. After stretching, Gauda eagerly pulled out one of the 5 spell recipes on the table. Fire arrow, evocation, 0 rings. Alright, that's it. Gauda had a strong impression of fire arrow. It was the spell that the mage Seda used to kill the leline creatures, the wolf rat, that invaded the herb garden, his own suicide spell. Its power was undeniable. At least at the level of magic. Gauda believed that in terms of destructive power, fire arrow was definitely among the best, surpassing his acid splash. After all, Introduction to Spells stated that among all schools of magic, evocation spells have the strongest destructive power. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.